Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name's Samantha Pierce, and I'm a private investigator. I used to be a cop until I got railroaded off the force by the brass downtown, but that's a story for another time. I take on all kinds of cases, mostly tracking down missing people, though plenty of them don't want to be found. They're often dodging a debt, an angry spouse, or simply trying to start fresh. But this case? It was different. Really different. I was at my usual spot in O'Connor's pub, working through a corned beef on rye with spicy mustard and sipping a cold draft when a guy walked in. He started chatting with O'Connor, the owner, who pointed in my direction. The guy made his way over. Now, I'm not exactly everyone's favorite, so O'Connor, being the retired cop and solid guy he is, casually reached under the bar for the sawed-off 12-gauge he keeps hidden and gave me a wink. "Ms. Hammer? That's me. What can I do for you?" "Name's James Holt. I'm trying to track down an old army buddy. We served together in Nam." "And what's the reason for finding him?" "Vets reunion. I've already tried the usual channels, the VA and so on, but the info they have is outdated." "Sounds interesting. You want a beer?" Over a cold one, we hashed out my fee. He gave me what little information he had, and I told him I'd be in touch. O'Connor put the shotgun back under the bar, left Rachel to keep an eye on things, and wandered over. "New client?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied. "Guy's name is James Holt. Vietnam vet. He's looking for an old army buddy named Dylan Matthews for some reunion." "Dylan Matthews, huh?" O'Connor rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "That name rings a bell. I've heard it somewhere before. If it comes to me, I'll let you know. Might have been a case I worked back in the day." Holt wasn't kidding when he said his friend would be hard to find. I ran the usual searches and came up with the basics. Dylan Matthews, ex-Army, 60-something, Caucasian, height, weight, hair, and eye color all matched the boot camp photo Holt had given me. Last known address was some podunk town in Iowa, but I had a feeling he wouldn't be there, and I was right. You meet a bunch of people from all walks of life when you're a beat cop for 7 years. In that time, I had made some friends who had access to information the general public never sees. I checked with them next. Now we were getting somewhere. Matthews had been jumping around the country like flea on a hot griddle, which pissed the VA off trying to catch up with him and issue benefits. He and Holt had served together in the same Army unit in Nam, and were both honorably discharged after getting in a nasty firefight and sent back to the States. Their platoon was on a mission behind enemy lines when the VC ambushed them. Matthews, Holt, and 3 other guys managed to escape. The kicker was that the 3 other guys had died in accidents since their discharges, the first about 4 years ago, the others since then. This was way too much of a coincidence. When I stopped in at O'Connor's for some lunch, he called me over and said, "I remembered where I'd heard of that guy you're looking for. I'm all ears." About 3 years ago, I covered an incident involving a car bomb, and it was that Matthews guy that owned the car. He'd gone to eat in one of those restaurants uptown and used their valet parking. When he'd called for his car, it blew sky high, taking the parking attendant with it. He clammed up when we interrogated him as to who might have done it and why. When we tried to follow up, he'd skipped town and we never could find him. I told O'Connor about the 5 guys in Nam and how 3 had died in the last 4 years, and it sure wasn't a coincidence. "He was supposed to be number 4, Mitchie," he said. "I'm willing to bet either Matthews or Holt's involved somehow. You better watch it out there." I wonder. This case is becoming one coincidence after another. Regardless, I'm still on retainer, so I'll continue looking for Matthews, although something's telling me he won't appreciate being found. After a few more days of no new leads, Lady Luck dealt me a break. I was having Maggie's, that's my 280Z, oil changed at Chuck's garage, and we were shooting the breeze over coffee. Chuck's another retired cop, so we sometimes discuss some case I'm working on. When I mentioned the Matthews case, Chuck said, "I know him." He rummaged in a desk drawer and pulled out a photo of a man in his mid-60s, graying hair, solidly built with a big grin on his face, standing next to what appeared to be a 30s model Ford coupe tricked out as a hot rod. "I met Dylan Matthews at a car show I went to last year in the next state. He was interested in selling that Ford Deuce in the picture, and I was interested in buying it. He was running the original flathead V8 in it, which is fairly rare. Most all the ones around have had monster OHV V8s dropped in him. Anyway, we haggled for a while, agreed on a price, and I left to contact my bank to wire me some cash. When I came back, he and the car were gone, poof. I figured him for a nut, but I never forgot that car or him either. I have the address and phone number he gave me if you want it." Did I ever? The phone number was disconnected, so I checked out the address. It was an apartment house in a city upstate run by a nice old couple who offered me some tea, and when I showed them the photo, they recognized Dylan right away. He'd lived there for almost 2 years and helping them with building repairs until one morning he up and disappeared, leaving his next month's rent shoved under their door in an envelope. Did they still have the envelope? He went to look, found it in a file and showed it to me. It was a previously used envelope and had his apartment address on it, but also a return address, a Mrs. Judith Wheeler in a small town north of there. The woman who answered the door was in her 40s wearing sweats and running shoes, her hair pulled back in a bun. She looked to be in her late 40s, average looks and figure, but her eyes were red and she looked tired. I told her I was from the VA looking for Dylan since we'd lost track of him and couldn't inform him about his increased benefits. She told me he was in the garage out back working on his car. She let me out the back door and I strolled over to a weathered, two-bay garage that looked like a miniature barn. He looked up at me from his workbench when I walked in. Unlike his picture, his hair was gray and his face was fuller, but it was him. I introduced myself, told him why I was there, and did he have a minute to talk. He nodded, wiping his hands on a shop towel. Then he opened a drawer and I was looking down the barrel of an Army .45 automatic. If you are who you say you are, let's see some ID and make it snappy. He was jumpy as a cornered rat, and he meant business. Since I'd foolishly left my purse in the house, I figured I'd better level with him rather than continue the bluff and maybe get myself shot. My name's Samantha Pierce. I'm a PI sent to find you by a guy named James Holt. You know him? He turned pale and his jaw clenched. Yeah, I know him, he grated. How much will you take to tell him you never saw me? Listen to me, Dylan. You can't buy me off because I'm not telling him. I'm pretty sure he's tried to kill you before, and I want no part of that. What's with you two anyway? I thought you were buds in Nam. We were, he said, lowering the gun. He gestured at a pair of lawn chairs. Have a seat, and I'll tell you all about it. I sat. We were looking for a VC ammo dump an informant had told HQ about, he began, a faraway look in his eyes. A green second Louis was leading us who thought he knew more about traveling in country than our NCOs, so we walked right into an ambush. Charlie had us in crossfire and half of us were taken out in the first volley, including the lieutenant. The rest of us hit the dirt and returned fire, but we were pinned down but good. Just as the mortar rounds started dropping, Donovan found a VC spider hole hidden in the grass and 5 of us dove in. Don, me, Holt, Sullivan, and Callahan. It was pitch dark down there, and you could barely stand up. Sullivan started to freak out, so we used cigarette lighters to see where we were going and started down the tunnel. Whenever we came to a branching tunnel, we followed the one that had air blowing through it, thinking it would lead to the surface. Our lighter fuel was running low when we heard voices. Dousing the light, we crept closer until we saw the inside of a cave. 6 VC were sitting in a circle playing some game, laughing and talking, their weapons piled near them. By the time they realized they weren't alone, they were dead. We had no idea how far we were from our lines, so we began to explore the cave looking for maps or compasses, figuring we'd wait until dark and make a run for it. Callahan found it first and called us over to see. It was a metal chest, about the size of a footlocker. We broke the lock, opened it, and found it was chock full of gold coins, jewelry, and gold bars. A real pirate's treasure. There was no way we'd be able to lug it back with us, so we took as much as we could safely carry in our shoulder packs, buried it deep, marked the spot on a map we found on one of the VC, waited until nightfall and made our way back to our own lines. We made a pact to go back for it one day and split the loot between us. We stayed in touch over the years until the US and Vietnam normalized relations, and we decided to try for the treasure. Then I heard Donovan was dead, accidentally shot while cleaning his pistol. I knew right away that was bullshit. He could take an M16 apart and put it together again blindfolded. Someone had killed him. Then Callahan died in a car wreck, and I started to sweat. It was too coincidental. Someone was after us. When I told Holt what I thought, he laughed it off, saying I was being paranoid. When Sullivan died in a mysterious house fire, I became really edgy, and when my car blew up, I ran. I've been running ever since. Holt's got to be behind this. He wants all the loot for himself. I'm staying here with my widowed sister until I can get my Rod's motor overhauled, then I'm gone. I told Dylan there was no way I was giving him up to Holt, so I figured I'd just go back empty-handed and that would be that. That was fine with him. So he put the .45 back in the drawer and started showing me his deuce coupe. He'd pulled the motor out and had it hanging from a chain riding on a pulley fastened to an overhead beam and secured to a support column. We were discussing the engine overhaul when a voice said, "Move a muscle and I'll kill you." It was Holt. He stepped inside the garage, closed the door, then said, "You can turn around, hammer, but no false moves." He had a 9mm in his hand and a grin on his face. I'd underestimated him. He'd played me for a sucker, and it pissed me off royally. "Am I going to have an accident too?" Dylan said. I know you killed those other guys, you greedy son of a bitch. We saved your sorry ass more than once in firefights, and this is how you repay us? There's enough gold in that chest to buy a small country, Holt replied, and then he laughed. I never was good at sharing. I decided to buy some time until I could make a move. The cops will know it's homicide when they find us shot, Holt. I have friends who have access to my file on this case, and the trail's going to lead back to you. But you're going to die in a fire, he replied, waving us over to the workbench with the gun. Garages burn up all the time with all the gas and paint around. Besides, if the cops do figure that something's fishy, I'll be long gone. Dylan was shaking and red-faced with rage and started cussing him, diverting his attention from me for a moment. I felt around behind me and my hand closed on a wrench. I heaved it at Holt, hitting him in the upper arm. He squawked, dropped the gun, and Dylan was on him like ugly on an ape. They started duking it out and I went for the .45 in the drawer just as Holt headbutted Dylan, hurling him against the support column where the hoist chain was fastened, knocking it loose. With a rattle of chain, the engine dropped on Holt, crushing him. Blood bubbled from his nose and mouth as he quivered for a moment and was still. I watched him bleed as Dylan ran for the house to call the law. While Holt was being bagged and tagged, Dylan and I gave statements to the effect that he was Dylan's visiting buddy from Nam who was suffering from PTSD, had gone off his rocker thinking we were VC and tried to kill us. He and Dylan struggled for the gun. Holt was squashed accidentally and they bought it. Once Dylan had calmed his sister down, we'd had dinner and were sitting on his back deck enjoying the evening while sipping a fine bourbon. I asked him, "What about the treasure? You going to go get it?" He shook his head. "Nope, it can stay right where it is. It's caused the death of 4 men, so it must be cursed or something. It's probably haunted by all the people the VC killed to get it. I'm sure all of them didn't just hand over that gold and jewelry. Let it stay buried with them." It made sense to me, so we drank to it. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I humiliated my cheating wife after collecting the evidence and kicked her out to the streets. I met a girl in college while working at a specific office supply store chain back in 2011. It started as an innocent crush between the two of us, then eventually evolved into a bit of fooling around both on and off work premises. I knew I liked her, and that she liked me, and the chemistry was through the roof between us. I also had my reservations because she was known as the easiest F in the whole job, and had sexual encounters with 3 of my coworkers. She came on to me strong, and I knew she was easy, and just wanted a chance with her. But then it developed into more. I had been fairly inexperienced sexually at the time, and she was opening up a whole new world to me, and was honestly the first girl to ever be that sexually interested in me. I felt like a king because for the first time in life, I had a girl who didn't just have feelings for me. She wanted to jump my bones all the time, and would often stroke my ego about how amazing I was in bed, and the best lover she's ever had. On top of that, we were best friends, had everything in common, and had a bond that neither of us had ever experienced before. It was an incredible start. This went on for a while until I finally made things official with her. We continued to fool around inside and outside of work, and things were great, until the newness started to slow down. At about the 6-month mark of our relationship, I noticed her sexual energy was kind of off. The dirty talk stopped, the enthusiasm subsided, and while her feelings for me were clearly getting stronger, we were saying "I love you" by then, the sexual chemistry died down a bit. I chalked it up to the fact that couples grow out of the honeymoon phase and start to settle into a sustainable routine. I was in decent shape at the time, treating her well and doing what would be considered necessary as the foundation of good sex and chemistry. We still had sex when we could, but it just wasn't as magical as it had once been due to her declining interest. At the time, we weren't living together, and she would often promise me that if we lived together, things would be different. This is where I began to start chasing the dragon, so to speak. I eventually brought up the issue again to her when I noticed things still weren't improving, and told her it was important to me and something I felt I needed to not only feel connected with her on a deeper level, but also as a man. It feels good to know you are wanted and needed by your partner, both physically and emotionally. She said it was nothing, and essentially she hadn't noticed a change. She told me things were fine and that she was just growing up. She considered her previous sexual energy as immature, and that she isn't the type anymore to be all over a dude like that. We still continued to have sex once a week, sometimes more, but it was never quite the same. Occasionally, she would revive some of that old enthusiasm on vacations, or times where she was particularly horny. In addition to our declining sex life, I started to notice little red flags, which were ultimately ignored in the long run, like her not being super generous, not being thoughtful as a partner. She had a habit of taking but not giving, and had no interest in doing anything to strengthen our relationship. She became complacent, lazy, combative, disrespectful, secretive, and generally took me for granted. Our first big blowout was over something I saw on her phone under the Whisper app. The Whisper app is essentially a place where you can make anonymous statements out into the ether with no consequences since there is no identifying information. One thing she posted was, "I want to F my professor so badly." Someone replied to her message in a DM and said, "Just do it." She responded with, "I'm trying, huh?" I confronted her about this and almost broke up with her over it, but stupidly decided to forgive her. This started a long trend of finding incriminating evidence in her phone. I should note that she had a rough childhood and had been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. I always took this into consideration, but couldn't excuse bad decision-making and overall being a bad girlfriend just because of the diagnosis, especially since I went above and beyond to give her all the love, support, and literally anything else she needs, in hopes of her maybe feeling inspired to reciprocate in her own way. I tried everything, spending more money, more dates, massages, foot rubs, home-cooked meals every night, words of affirmation, vacations, sex toys, BDSM, something she mentioned wanting to try, and to no avail. She just wasn't digging any of it. Despite all of this, my career was progressing well, my salary was getting bigger, and I started to get serious about the future, marriage, kids, etc., and I decided at around 5 years together to move in. It started out okay, and for a moment felt like we were getting into a groove and that our sex lives were improving. She was more helpful around the house. She eventually stopped complimenting me, only had sex with me if I asked, usually once a week or when she noticed I was being kind of irritable. We became very stagnant and I was internally miserable, knowing that she essentially brought nothing to the table. Financially, I was the breadwinner and paying for mostly everything, didn't work, to improve our home life, and could care less if I was being satisfied, despite having all her needs met and having an incredible support system. I kept trying to do my best and one-upping myself, went on self-improvement journeys, tried to communicate more, and kept giving. She would say she's trying, but it was always in a way that was the least amount of effort and bare minimum, and would complain that nothing was ever good enough for me. Forgetting to do anything for my birthday, no sex on Valentine's Day despite giving her the works, coming home to her being off of work all week in a dirty house, while the first thing she asked me is what's for dinner. I was becoming exhausted with her and felt like a parent, not a partner. She ignored everything as usual and kept chugging along, thinking my life is this way because I'm not good enough. I need to improve in every way so she can finally see that I'm deserving of love and affection and that I'm worth putting effort into. My self-esteem was nothing at this point, and I eventually decided that the only way to fix this and finally get the girl I fell in love with back was to marry her. Insert facepalm here. I was still holding on to the sporadic moments of affection, the hope of better days, and the fact that if she was everything I needed before that, improving myself and her life can bring her back. In 2019, we finally tied the knot and had a beautiful destination wedding in Jamaica where I told everyone who ever knew us that she's the one and we will be together forever. This is where our relationship started to take a turn for even worse. Because our relationship spanned over 10 years, it's hard to put it all here. I will follow up with a part 2 and explain how the cheating started and how everything eventually led to nasty divorce. Sorry for the wall of text. Alright, Mac John 77 says, "This story is an absolute train wreck. You start dating a girl because the sex is great. Eventually the sex dies down and she starts being less affectionate. So you move in with her? Then this continues and escalates and you find evidence of her either cheating or at least wanting to cheat. So you marry her? At a certain point, I have to start taking the blame off of her. She showed you who she really is, repeatedly. You just chose not to believe her." Opie replies, "For sure, man. 6 months later, I get it now and obviously, see what you mean. Young, dumb, insecure, and inexperienced. Trust me, I know after a certain point it was my fault for ignoring red flags and pushing forward. Let's go to part 2 and 3. So after our massive destination wedding and tens of thousands of dollars spent on an elaborate display of love, things didn't immediately decline. They actually improved a little. We spent the next few months in what felt like a mini honeymoon phase as we enjoyed the new title and presenting ourselves to our friends and loved ones as the couple that had made it. It felt like we had a fresh start. And while things weren't perfect, I saw her starting to try a little more. She was slightly more affectionate, a little more enthusiastic during sex, helping around the house, and with bills a lot more. She eventually decided she wanted to go back to school so that she could make more money and contribute more. And I agreed to take care of the bills while she used the money from her part-time job to pay for her school. It was at this point that the micro-cheating started to pick back up. The micro-cheating. 2014, before marriage. She posted a comment on an anonymous app explaining how badly she wanted to F her professor and confessed on said app that she was actively trying to do so. I forgave her. 2015, before marriage. A video was sent to a female ex-girlfriend of hers via email of her masturbating. She claimed to have not sent it and that it was a 6-year-old video despite having been sent the month prior. 2016, before marriage. I joked around with her one day and said via text, "I know what you did. Don't try and lie about it either." I knew she watched one of our Netflix shows without me. She then confessed and said she didn't mean anything by it and nothing happened between them. I was obviously shocked and didn't expect any of that to come out. She was hanging out with and flirting with an old friend from high school who clearly had feelings for her. We'll call him Jacob. She claimed nothing happened. I forgave her. 2017, before marriage. I saw a message between her and her group chat friends at work saying how her favorite sexual position is riding. In our personal life, she would tell me she hated riding, and we rarely ever did it in the 10 years we spent together. In 2018, I started noticing that she was a lot more sexually active behind closed doors than she was with me, except for the occasional vacation, and even vacations were hit or miss. She started buying sex toys. Noticed she was regularly watching porn and masturbating more often the moment I would leave the house. I have no issues with this. However, as you can imagine, I was hoping that somehow that would translate to something in our bedroom, and it never did. Despite my best efforts to create a safe space for us to enjoy sex together, for her, sex with me was a chore, a labor of love, something to pacify me and keep me manipulated. If she wanted her needs met, she would rather handle it herself even when I offered to be a student, learn her body more, and learn how to please her in the way she needed. She continued to decline my offers and stood her ground saying what you do already is fine. I'm good. I don't need all of that. 2019, 4 months before the wedding. I noticed her starting to become friendly with coworkers at her new job. This wasn't a problem, but they were a group of immature party girls that were dealing with a lot of situationships according to her stories with them. I would often drop her off and pick her up from work to make things easier for her, so I eventually got to learn a lot about her coworkers. However, there was a particular gentleman at her job that seemed to have a lot of attention from the ladies at work. We will call him Jason. Jason was a good-looking guy, on the shorter side but very fit, muscles and all, and many ladies at the job were willing to be a side chick to him since he had a girlfriend. One day, I came across a message to her friend at work explaining to her how hot she thought he was, how she's obsessed with his abs, and she thinks that Jason is going to get her in trouble with her fiancé one day. I confronted her and took the brunt of the blame for invading her privacy. However, the one time every few months that I would snoop through her phone, there was always something incriminating there. I never enjoyed looking through her phone because I knew I would always find something. We moved past that incident and still got married. In 2020, things started to decline as her mental health started to take a hit from the stressors she had in life. School, work, me, and my constant requests for improvement and for us to work together to make our lives better. The first thing that got me considering the idea of leaving was our first wedding anniversary. She didn't bother getting me a gift despite me getting a homemade gift for her and treating her to a day full of activities and a nice dinner. That night, she apparently decided that my gift was going to be sex, and she laid on the bed and with the most begrudging voice ever she said, "Come on, hurry up and get it over with." I declined. The next day when I confronted her about the lack of gift and her negative approach towards initiating sex, she got defensive and said, "I forgot." Okay, I just didn't think about it. And in regards to the sex, nothing is ever good enough for you. Everything I do is wrong somehow. She began being a little more complacent. And while she was like a best friend to me, she lacked a lot of the characteristics that would make us feel like more than roommates. Friends with occasional benefits at best. We always got along when it came to things unrelated to our relationship, but I always felt like I was getting the bare minimum from her and constantly starving for love, affection, and sex. She used this to her advantage often and would attempt to use sex as an apology or get out of jail free card whenever I brought up an issue to her. Things chugged along, and we continued going through the motions. We were on vacations, activities, adventures, dinners, you name it, and it was still always just a watered-down version of the person I truly knew her to be. She was my best friend, but I started having trouble seeing a happy future with her. 2021, after marriage. I broke down one day after coming home randomly with my brother, catching her masturbating to a picture of Jason after we hadn't had sex in almost a month. I told her it made me feel unwanted, and it hurt to feel like I'm being deprived because you are focusing your sexual energy on him by yourself. She denied it, said it's not like that, and that she still needs me and what I have to offer, and attempted to be the best version of herself for me for about a week in order to bring me back in. I fell for it. Not too long after this, her mental health took a turn for the worst and she admitted herself into a psych ward. I came and visited her every day after work for 3.5 weeks straight, sat with her in the mandatory therapy sessions, and even brought her favorite foods and snacks when she didn't like the lunch offered that day. I believed if she can overcome her depression and get the correct treatment and therapy that she would be a better person for me and our relationship would improve as a result. It did not. 2022, after marriage. This is when everything officially went to crap. Notice that she is spending a lot more time with our friends and partying and having fun. There was also a trend of being really casually dressed when we went out, but being dressed to impress when she went out with her coworkers. She also developed a new habit of posting overly sexual memes and text posts that were vague, but still clearly had nothing to do with me based on her current sex life. I would question her about it when she would reference things like she loves in the bedroom in these story posts, and I would ask, "Is that something you enjoy? I can do that for you if you like." And she would just kind of dismiss it, feeling as if I was trying to control what she does on her social media. Not too long after this, I'm cleaning under our bed and I find a massive dildo, and I mean massive. I told her it made me uncomfortable that you were using it based on her lack of sex life, and she claimed that she has never used it before. I moved on, but as you can imagine, it left me with a very weird insecure feeling that just never sat right with me. At this point in my life, my career was going well. I had side hustles and passive income streams set up and had started to become a little more consumed with work. However, always set aside entire days and weekends for us to spend together doing something she loved, and I would always spoil her and try to take care of her emotional needs the best I can. I got really into NFTs at the time, and during a week-long NFT convention, I spent a lot of time out that week networking and meeting people from the space. I'm not usually that guy. I'm usually home doing something nerdy and really only went out with my wife and my boys occasionally. However, that week I was out late almost every day and let her know ahead of time that this was going to be the case and that it would only be temporary, even going as far as to invite her to all of the events I was able to get her into. One morning, I was out late for the Bored Ape Yacht party and was communicating with her the entire time, giving her my timeline and when I planned to arrive home. I found it odd that she was up until 2 a.m. still texting back when she usually went to sleep early. Went home that night, found her still up and didn't think much about it. We both eventually fell asleep. The next morning I noticed she isn't in bed. She sometimes gets up before me, and I get woken up by the sounds of her Apple Watch buzzing frantically with text messages. I look over and see it's from a group message with her coworker and a number saved as Tim Bumble. I opened up the text from her and discovered they were speaking with a gentleman named Tim from the dating app Bumble who looked like a supermodel and sent them multiple pictures proving just how well endowed he was. Both my wife and her coworker were clearly interested in him as I was hit with a long string of messages between the three of them planning a threesome for the following weekend. In addition to that, nudes were contributed to the group text by each party member, and there was even a side conversation between my wife and him outside of the group chat where she expressed her personal interest in his member and the things she wanted to do to him. I officially lost my crap and things didn't just go downhill from there. They went off a freaking cliff. Edit. Part 3 since it was removed. So after finding a mountain of incriminating evidence against her, I gathered my thoughts and proceeded to confront her with who the EFF is Tim. She told me that it was her co-worker's friend and that she was putting on an act with him in order to help her co-worker out. Apparently her co-worker really liked the guy, met him on Bumble, and wanted my wife's help at seducing him into a threesome. The plan was to set up the threesome. My wife would bail at the last minute and Tim and the co-worker would be together alone to complete the deed. This was the most idiotic thing I ever heard. Obviously, I was frustrated by the betrayal of her being completely inappropriate behind my back, but it was also the fact that she displayed a type of energy towards this stranger in those messages that I had been trying to receive from her for years. She claimed she was incapable, claimed her sex drive wasn't what it used to be, and that dirty talk made her feel uncomfortable. But here she was contradicting herself in every single way possible. We cooled off for a bit, and I went to a friend's house for 2 days to clear my head and figure out the next steps. We were a week away from going on a 7-day cruise we had planned prior, and I was trying to figure out what to do about it. She obviously apologized profusely and admitted it was dumb to ruin her marriage over helping a friend EFF a stranger. She started the process of trying to temporarily be the world's best wife for the next week, sending me lunch through Uber Eats with love messages, helping out around the house, trying to be sweet and affectionate, and offering me sexual favors. One particular night, we had really great, mind-blowing emotional sex that reminded me of our earlier sex life, and it made me feel like this was the push she needed to get back into that headspace with me again. If this is what she will be like moving forward, then I could possibly move past things and start rebuilding trust again. So I forgave her and tried to move forward, even deciding to take her on the cruise with me. The cruise went all right for the first few days as I tried to keep my mind off things and enjoy the new effort she was putting in and the person she was trying to be for me, but it kept eating me up inside. Eventually, about 4 days in, I cracked and looked through her phone again to see if there was any evidence I was missing out on. To be honest, I didn't really find much other than a conversation with said coworker vaguely commenting on the issues of our relationship based on a conversation they must have had prior. Apparently, she felt that there were issues and problems in the relationship leading to this that she felt comfortable telling her friends and coworkers, but never to me, even when we set time aside for weekly communication sessions. We argued about it, and she broke down crying and stayed in the cabin for the rest of the day, frustrated that I will never get over this and nothing she does will ever be good enough to fix it. The rest of the cruise was quiet and awkward as we tried to make the best of the situation, but the vibe just wasn't the same. When we got back, we started to discuss couples therapy and ways for us to build back up the trust and spark in our relationship. She agreed, and I started looking up therapists and asking for her to do the same. She dragged her feet and never got around to the task despite spending hours scrolling on Instagram daily. Eventually, we found therapy we could afford and started doing sessions, but it was pointless since she put zero thought or effort into any of it and treated it all like a chore. Eventually, I snapped one day during our session, frustrated that she wasn't taking it seriously, frustrated that she didn't even help source the therapy for the problem she created, and even decided to post a funny meme that day about being in a threesome and not knowing what to do. Great meme, really funny, just a little too close to home. At this point, she was all out of effort and completely complacent and devoid of all giving a crap. She began doubling down on the partying and began hanging out and talking to Jason more, spending a lot more time portraying herself as a promiscuous woman on social media and denying a lot of my sexual advances. I stopped planning trips with her or anything for the future because of how weird and uncertain things were. We spent a few months in a weird twilight space where we just went with the flow as roommates, not working on the issues at hand and trying to ignore the dying relationship. It was at this point I started noticing her and Jason getting closer. She'd always mentioned that he was a cool dude and they had similar interests: smoking weed, gaming, anime, etc. I understood why they were cool, and she would say things like, "He's short, he has a girlfriend, we're just friends," nothing more, and I would accept it since I didn't have proof otherwise. I continued to snoop through her phone and didn't find anything incriminating other than walking to the train together after work and smoking weed on their lunch breaks. I told her based on recent events that alone time with him makes me uncomfortable, and I prefer if you not hang out with him alone outside of work. She agreed and assured me it would stop. A month later, I asked if she is still hanging out with him despite the picture being sent from him to her of her walking down the street. I don't know the reference behind this picture, and she claimed not to know why he sent it either. She assured me nothing was going on and sent me a screenshot of her text messages with him, which were few and far between over the course of the last few months, essentially saying that they barely communicate. One Sunday morning, she had plans for brunch with her friends, and she was dressed stunning. Of course, I had already felt like she put more effort into her appearance when going out with friends than with me, but I saw she was happy and excited for the day, and I tried to just internalize it. She noticed I was a little off and asked me, "What's going on with you? You seem upset about something." I told her how I felt, and she proceeded to cry, saying I always have to find a way to ruin her fun and put her down. "It's like you see me being happy about to go have fun and try to take it away from me before I go." That was never the case for me, and I explained that to her, but it fell on deaf ears, and she just left upset. She ignored my texts and calls the rest of the day as I tried to gauge when she was coming back home. My cousin was admitted to the hospital the day before, and I wanted to use the car to see her. She never responded. I ended up falling asleep waiting for her to come home around midnight, only to wake up when she drunkenly stumbles into bed and passes out with all her clothes on from the night before. She refuses to answer any of my questions and falls asleep. Me being upset and unable to sleep, I went into the living room to sleep. I noticed something fall out of her jacket pocket and saw it was a throat spray she had apparently purchased that night. It was still in the packaging, and she keeps all of her receipts. I never brought it up to her as I didn't know how to. In the morning, I asked her what happened that night, and she said she got really drunk and was upset with me and wanted her space. She also told me that she decided to do coke that night for the first time. Neither of us had ever tried it because her friend really wanted some, and she tried to bump off a random dealer in the middle of the park to test it before purchasing. I freaked out and told her it was idiotic and irresponsible, and she could have died, but she brushed it off and told me I'm always mad about something. 2 days later on Yom Kippur, I went to work to see most people had decided to work from home that day. I wasn't aware that the holiday was that day, and thought it back to earlier in the morning. My wife was getting ready for school as I was getting ready for work and was prepared to head into class. After realizing that she went to a public college and shouldn't have class that day, I called her to find out where she was. She never answered and instead texted me telling me she found out there was no class when she got there and was headed back home. It was around 12 p.m. I told her to call me ASAP. She took 2 hours to do so, saying she was on the train. I didn't feel comfortable about it, and later at home asked her to promise me she was telling the truth. I noticed that night in her phone that her coworker had texted her, "How did it go?" to which she called her and spoke with her for 20 minutes. The following morning, I noticed her drawer was open and I saw something familiar, the deep throat spray, and what I thought was the associated receipt. However, this time the throat spray was not in its original packaging and had clearly been used. The receipt next to it was actually for a McDonald's drive-thru order nowhere near our apartment or her school around the time she said she was on the train. I confronted her, and she assured me it wasn't her receipt and that she just tested out the spray. She also tried to convince me that she bought it for me and her to use, despite never telling me this and purchasing it on a night where she claimed to be mad at me. I asked her about what her coworker meant about how did it go, how did what go, and what did you guys talk about if there was no school that day. She dismissed it as her and her coworker just catching up. A month later, I found myself going through the phone records online trying to locate a number I had called in the past for tax help and realized that I was able to see who texts me and who I have texted going back months prior. I couldn't see the content of the texts, but I was able to see who sent what to who and when. Instantly, I decided to look under her phone records since I was the primary account holder. I noticed that she had been texting a certain number back and forth for months. I go to her phone to try to locate the contact, and lo and behold, it's Jason. Thousands of messages between them over the course of 3 months, none of which were reflected in the empty screenshot of her messages with him, meaning she must have been deleting everything as she goes. I was furious and confronted her. Prior to this, she told me she had no one to talk to about her problems and her world was falling apart because she had no support system like I did with my friends, despite how close she had seemed to get to her coworkers. When I confronted her about Jason, she finally admitted that they had become close and he was like one of her closest friends and that they confided in each other about their individual relationships and that it was platonic otherwise. She eventually also admitted that she had saw him that day on Yom Kippur when she went to school and that they still hang out outside of work. I was furious. This was the final straw, and I told her if you really like him that much, you should be with him. She yelled back frustrated, saying that she doesn't even like him like that, and nothing she said would get me to believe her. Claimed I was being jealous for no reason, and that their friendship doesn't threaten us in any way. I couldn't trust her anymore and didn't believe anything she said, obviously, so I reached out to Jason. I asked Jason if he was effing my wife, to which he claimed no, he wasn't. They just talk and hang out sometimes. He doesn't keep any records of their messages because he has a girlfriend and doesn't want any drama by saving texts with female coworkers. Claimed he doesn't mess with girls at work as a personal rule and apologized to me, telling me that, as a man, "I'm sorry you're going through this." I didn't know what to believe. I thanked him for the honesty and proceeded to tell my wife to leave the apartment for a few days while I packed my stuff. I packed, I cried. I said goodbye to my cats and goodbye to her, and proceeded to go to my father's house after the most traumatic final goodbye I had ever experienced. We were both devastated to see where we currently were after all we had been through and how far we had come. All I wanted was to go back to better days, but I couldn't stop thinking about the lying, the mistrust, the laziness, and the complete void left in me by being in such a toxic, unsatisfying relationship for so long. I became a shell of myself.
Welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Ethan Hawthorne's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at the screen, seeing his wife Olivia's name. Medical conference in Chicago next week. Don't forget. Ethan's lips curved into a smile. He had an idea. With Olivia out of town, he could finally tackle that bedroom renovation project she'd been hinting at for months. What better way to show his love than surprising her with a freshly updated space? He headed to the hardware store, mind already racing with plans. Paint swatches, new curtains, maybe even that fancy light fixture she'd been eyeing. As he loaded supplies into the car, a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered that something felt off about Olivia's text. He shook it off. After all, he was a 35-year-old high school history teacher, not some paranoid teenager. Back home, Ethan dove into the project with gusto. He moved furniture, taped off baseboards, and started emptying closets. That's when he found it. A plain shoebox tucked away in the far corner of Olivia's side. Curiosity got the better of him. He lifted the lid, expecting old photos or keepsakes. What he found instead made his blood run cold. Passionate love letters, signed simply A. Photos of Olivia with a man Ethan didn't recognize, looking far too intimate for comfort. 2 prepaid phones he'd never seen before. And most chilling of all, a handwritten note outlining a plan to deal with E permanently. Ethan's hands shook as he rifled through the contents. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick joke. But as he read letter after letter, examined photo after photo, the truth became undeniable. His wife was having an affair, and it seemed she might be planning something far worse. He stumbled to the bed, collapsing onto the edge. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How long had this been going on? Who was this A? And what exactly did they mean by dealing with E permanently? Ethan's first instinct was to confront Olivia immediately, but a small, rational part of his brain held him back. If she truly was planning something sinister, tipping his hand could be dangerous. He needed advice. He needed support. He needed Marcus. Fumbling for his phone, Ethan dialed his best friend and fellow teacher. Marcus picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey man, what's up?" Ethan's voice cracked as he spoke. "Marcus, I need you. Can we meet?" The rusty nail. As soon as possible. There must have been something in his tone, because Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way. Hang tight, buddy." 30 minutes later, Ethan sat across from Marcus in a dimly lit booth at the Rusty Nail. The bar was mercifully quiet for a Saturday afternoon. Ethan's hands trembled as he pushed the shoebox across the table. "I found this while cleaning out the closet," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're not going to believe what's inside." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as he began examining the contents. Ethan watched his friend's expression shift from curiosity to shock to outright anger. "Jesus Christ, Ethan," Marcus breathed. I don't even know what to say. Tell me I'm crazy. Ethan pleaded. Tell me there's some innocent explanation for all of this. Marcus shook his head. I wish I could, man, but this looks pretty damn incriminating. They spent the next hour poring over every scrap of evidence. The love letters were explicit, leaving no doubt about the nature of the relationship. The photos showed Olivia in various intimate settings with a tall, dark-haired man Ethan didn't recognize. Wait a second, Ethan said, squinting at one particular image. I know this guy. That's Dr. Adrian Blackwood. He works with Olivia at Evergreen General. Marcus whistled low. Well, that certainly complicates things. You think this medical conference is just a cover. Ethan nodded miserably. Has to be. God, how could I have been so blind? Hey, don't beat yourself up, Marcus said, reaching across the table to grip Ethan's shoulder. You trusted your wife. That's not a crime. No, but what they're planning might be, Ethan replied, gesturing to the ominous note. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Marcus thought for a moment. We need more information. Concrete evidence. Have you considered hiring a private investigator? Ethan blinked. The thought hadn't even occurred to him. You really think that's necessary? Look, man, I hate to say it, but if half of what's in this box is true, you need to protect yourself, both legally and, well, physically. The gravity of the situation hit Ethan anew. His wife, the woman he loved and trusted for years, might actually be planning to harm him. The room seemed to spin. This can't be happening, he muttered, on top of everything else. Marcus leaned forward. What do you mean? Ethan sighed heavily. I got passed over for department head last week. Again. I thought things couldn't get any worse, but this. He gestured helplessly at the damning evidence spread before them. Shit, I'm sorry, Marcus said. Why didn't you tell me about the job? Ethan shrugged. Didn't want to burden you with my problems. Fat lot of good that did me. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Ethan's predicament hanging heavy between them. Finally, Marcus spoke. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, we find a good PI. Get some hard evidence of what Olivia and this Adrian guy are up to. In the meantime, you act completely normal at home. Don't give her any reason to suspect you know. Ethan nodded, grateful for his friend's clear-headed thinking. And then what? Then we figure out exactly what they're planning and how to stop it, Marcus said firmly. But one step at a time, all right? We've got your back, man. For the first time since discovering the shoebox, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't alone in this. With Marcus's help, maybe he could unravel this nightmare and come out the other side. As they left the bar, Ethan's resolve solidified. He would get to the bottom of Olivia's deception, and whatever she and Adrian were planning, he'd be ready. Little did Ethan know, the rabbit hole went far deeper than he could have imagined. The following Monday, Ethan found himself sitting across from Veronica Sloan, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion and results. Marcus had done some quick research and set up the meeting, insisting that time was of the essence. Veronica listened intently as Ethan laid out the situation, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. Mr. Hawthorne, I won't sugarcoat this. What you're describing is serious. If your suspicions are correct, we're dealing with infidelity at best, and potentially much worse. Ethan swallowed hard. How quickly can you get me proof? Give me a week, Veronica said. I'll need access to your home when your wife is out, and any passwords or account information you can provide. The more I have to work with, the faster I can get results. Ethan nodded, scribbling down everything she asked for. As he handed over the information, a wave of guilt washed over him. This felt like a betrayal. But then he remembered the contents of that shoebox and steeled himself. Olivia had betrayed him first. True to her word, Veronica delivered results within days. The stack of evidence she presented made Ethan's stomach churn. I'm sorry, Mr. Hawthorne, but your suspicions were correct, Veronica said. her voice gentle but firm. Your wife is indeed having an affair with Dr. Adrian Blackwood, but that's not all we uncovered. Ethan braced himself. What else? Veronica spread out a series of financial documents. It appears that Dr. Blackwood and your wife have been embezzling funds from the hospital's charitable foundation. We're talking significant sums of money here. Ethan's head spun. This was so much worse than he'd imagined. How? How long has this been going on? Based on the records we've found, at least 6 months, possibly longer. Veronica hesitated before continuing. There's more, Mr. Hawthorne, and I'm afraid it's not good news. She pulled out bank statements and retirement account information. Ethan's eyes widened as he saw the drastically reduced balances. Your wife has been systematically draining your joint savings and retirement funds, Veronica explained. The money's been funneled into offshore accounts we haven't been able to trace yet. Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Not only was Olivia cheating on him, but she was stealing from him too? How could he have been so blind? As if reading his thoughts, Veronica continued, Mr. Hawthorne, I've seen cases like this before. It's not uncommon for the victim to blame themselves. But I want you to understand something. Your wife has been gaslighting you for months. Gaslighting? Ethan echoed, the term vaguely familiar. Veronica nodded. It's a form of psychological manipulation. She's been making you doubt your own memory and judgment. Those times you felt confused or thought you were losing track of things, it was deliberate. Memories flooded back. Olivia insisting he'd agreed to plans he didn't remember making. Important documents going missing, only to turn up in places he swore he'd already checked. The constant feeling that he was losing his grip. Oh, God, Ethan whispered, putting his head in his hands. Veronica gave him a moment to process before speaking again. Mr. Hawthorne, I know this is overwhelming, but right now, you need to focus on protecting yourself, both legally and financially. Ethan looked up, a newfound determination in his eyes. You're right. What do I need to do? First, we need to secure any remaining assets, Veronica said. Then, we start building a case. Every bit of evidence, every inconsistency in their stories, it all matters. As Veronica outlined their next steps, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the life he thought he had. Rage at Olivia's betrayal. But beneath it all, a spark of something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. He would expose the truth. He would reclaim his life. And he would make damn sure Olivia and Adrian paid for what they'd done. As Ethan left Veronica's office, his mind raced with everything he'd learned. The weight of it all threatened to crush him, but he forced himself to focus. He had work to do. First stop, the bank. He needed to freeze any accounts Olivia hadn't already drained and set up new ones in his name only. As he drove, he rehearsed what he'd say. A half-truth about identity theft concerns should do the trick without raising too many red flags. Next, he'd need to gather every important document he could find. Birth certificate, social security card, car titles. Anything Olivia might try to use against him. He made a mental note to rent a safety deposit box to store it all. As he pulled into the bank parking lot, his phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. XO. Ethan's jaw clenched. How many times had he received messages like this? Never suspecting the truth. He took a deep breath, forcing his features into a neutral expression before responding. No problem. Have a good night. Keep it simple. Act normal. Don't give anything away. As he walked into the bank, Ethan's mind drifted to the mountain of questions still unanswered. How deep did this embezzlement scheme go? Were there other victims besides the hospital and himself? And most pressingly, what exactly were Olivia and Adrian planning to do to him? The chilling phrase from that handwritten note echoed in his mind. Deal with E permanently. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. He needed answers and fast. But for now, he had to focus on the task at hand, one step at a time. As he approached the teller's window, Ethan straightened his shoulders and plastered on his best concerned citizen face. Time to start taking back control of his life. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. Ethan Hawthorne stood in the garage, his hand shaking slightly as he examined the small GPS tracker. It was barely larger than a quarter, innocuous enough to go unnoticed. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. The past week had been a blur of covert actions and sleepless nights. After his meeting with Veronica Sloan, Ethan had thrown himself into gathering evidence. He'd ordered hidden cameras and GPS trackers, watching tutorial videos late into the night to ensure he installed them correctly. Now, as the first rays of dawn crept through the garage windows, Ethan prepared to take his surveillance to the next level. He slipped out to Olivia's car, carefully attaching the tracker beneath the rear bumper. His heart raced, half expecting Olivia to burst out of the house at any moment. But the morning remained quiet. Ethan retreated inside, heading straight for his laptop. He pulled up a fake Facebook profile he'd created under the name Alex Thompson. It was bare bones for now, just enough to pass a cursory inspection. He typed Adrian Blackwood into the search bar, his jaw clenching as the doctor's smug face appeared on the screen. Ethan spent the next hour combing through Adrian's public posts, making notes of any potentially useful information. Favorite restaurants, hobbies, mutual friends with Olivia. Anything that might help him understand their relationship better. As he worked, a notification pinged on his phone. The GPS tracker was active. A map showed Olivia's car heading towards the hospital. Ethan's stomach churned. Was she really going to work or meeting Adrian somewhere? He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. He couldn't let paranoia cloud his judgment. He needed hard evidence, not just suspicions. Over the next few days, Ethan fell into a routine. He'd wake up early, check the GPS logs, and review any overnight footage from the hidden cameras. Then he'd head to work, struggling to maintain a facade of normalcy while his mind raced with new information and theories. It was on a Wednesday afternoon that Ethan's careful observation finally paid off. He was grading papers in the living room, half listening to Olivia's phone conversation in the kitchen. She thought he was engrossed in his work, but every sense was attuned to her words. "Yes, everything's set," Olivia said in a low voice. "We'll transfer the last batch of funds next week. Then we can move forward with the plan for Ethan." Ethan's blood ran cold. He forced himself to keep writing, pen moving mechanically across the page. "Don't worry," Olivia continued. "He doesn't suspect a thing. Once we frame him for the embezzlement, it'll be easy to handle the rest." The implications of her words hit Ethan like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to steal from him. They wanted him out of the picture entirely. As soon as Olivia ended the call, Ethan excused himself to the bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to quell the panic rising in his chest. This was no longer just about infidelity or financial crimes. His life was in danger. He needed help, legal help. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Samantha Torres speaking. "Sam, it's Ethan. Ethan Hawthorne. I need your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ethan? My God, it's been ages. What's going on?" "I can't explain everything over the phone," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "But I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. Can we meet?" Something in his tone must have conveyed the urgency of the situation. "Of course," Samantha replied without hesitation. "My office. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Do you need the address?" Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "No, I'll find it. Thank you, Sam. Really." As he ended the call, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. Samantha had always been the sharpest legal mind in their college circle. If anyone could help him navigate this nightmare, it was her. The next day, Ethan sat across from Samantha in her sleek downtown office, pouring out the whole sordid tale. To her credit, Samantha listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. When Ethan finished, Samantha leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "Ethan, I won't sugarcoat this. You're in a very precarious position. But the fact that you've gathered so much evidence already is going to work in your favor. So, what do we do? Ethan asked, his voice hoarse from talking. Samantha's eyes glinted with determination. We build an ironclad case. Every scrap of evidence, every inconsistency in their stories, every financial transaction, it all goes into a dossier. We need to be ready to move at a moment's notice. For the next several hours, they pored over the evidence Ethan had collected, organizing it into a coherent narrative. Samantha's legal expertise helped identify key points that would be crucial in both criminal and civil proceedings. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office, Samantha fixed Ethan with a serious look. There's one more thing we need to discuss, Ethan. Your safety. Ethan nodded. I've been thinking about that too. If they're willing to frame me for embezzlement, who knows what else they might try. Exactly, Samantha said. I want you to start keeping a detailed log of your movements. Anytime you leave the house, text me your destination. And if anything feels off, anything at all, you call me immediately. Got it, Ethan replied, feeling both reassured and terrified by the precautions. As he left Samantha's office, dossier tucked securely in his briefcase, Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, certainly. Anger at Olivia's betrayal, but also a growing sense of resolve. He would not be a victim. He would fight back, armed with the truth and the law. Little did he know, the battle was far from over. In fact, it was about to get much, much worse. The following weeks were a masterclass in compartmentalization for Ethan. By day, he taught his history classes, discussed homework assignments, and attended faculty meetings. But his mind was never far from the web of deceit he was untangling at home. The strain began to show. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. His normally pristine lesson plans became disorganized, and more than once he found himself staring blankly at his students, lost in thought about his next move against Olivia and Adrian. It was Daryl Washington who finally confronted him about it. The two had been friends since Ethan started at the school, sharing a love for obscure historical trivia and terrible dad jokes. All right, spill it, Daryl said one afternoon, cornering Ethan in the empty teacher's lounge. What's going on with you, man? You look like you haven't slept in weeks. Ethan opened his mouth to deflect, but the concern in Daryl's eyes broke through his defenses. Before he knew it, the whole story came pouring out. The affair, the embezzlement, the threats to his life. By the time he finished, Daryl looked as shell-shocked as Ethan felt. Jesus Christ, Daryl breathed. I had no idea. Ethan, why didn't you say something sooner? Ethan shrugged helplessly. I didn't want to drag anyone else into this mess. It's bad enough that I'm living it. Daryl shook his head firmly. That's not how friendship works, buddy. You don't have to go through this alone. He paused, considering. Look, I can't fix this for you, but I can help cover for you here at school. If you need to duck out for a meeting with your lawyer or whatever, just say the word. I've got your back. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Thanks, Daryl. That means a lot. With Daryl's support at work, Ethan was able to focus more energy on building his case. He spent hours each night combing through financial records, cross-referencing dates and transactions. The scope of Olivia and Adrian's embezzlement scheme was staggering. It wasn't just the hospital's charitable foundation they'd been stealing from. The fraud extended to several affiliated clinics and even patient accounts. One night, as Olivia slept soundly upstairs, Ethan made a breakthrough. He'd managed to access her laptop while she was in the shower, quickly copying files onto a hidden flash drive. Now, poring over the documents, he uncovered the full extent of their plan. They'd been siphoning money from multiple sources, laundering it through a series of shell companies before funneling it into offshore accounts. The amounts were astronomical. Millions of dollars that should have gone to patient care and medical research, now lining the pockets of two greedy conspirators. Ethan's hands shook as he compiled his findings. This wasn't just about him anymore. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of victims. Patients who'd been overcharged, employees whose pensions had been raided, charities deprived of crucial funding. He knew he had to do something, but going to the police now might tip off Olivia and Adrian before he had all the evidence he needed to ensure their conviction. No! He needed a subtler approach. After agonizing over the decision, Ethan composed an anonymous email to the hospital's compliance officer. He outlined his suspicions about financial irregularities in the charitable foundation, providing just enough detail to spark an internal investigation without revealing the full scope of what he knew. As he hit send, Ethan felt a mix of relief and trepidation. The wheels were in motion now. There was no going back. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Olivia's phone ringing. He feigned sleep as she answered, his ears straining to catch her side of the conversation. "What do you mean an audit?" Olivia hissed, her voice tight with barely contained panic. "Who authorized that?" Ethan's heart raced. His anonymous tip had worked faster than he'd anticipated. No, don't do anything yet," Olivia continued. "We need to be careful. I'll talk to Adrian and we'll figure out our next move." As soon as Olivia left for work, Ethan sprang into action. He knew time was running out. If Olivia and Adrian realized how much he knew, they might accelerate their plans against him. He spent the morning making copies of all his evidence, storing backups in secure locations. Then, steeling himself, he made a series of anonymous calls to some of the victims he'd identified in his investigation. He couldn't reveal everything, but he urged them to come forward to the authorities with any suspicions about financial mismanagement at the hospital. By the time evening rolled around, Ethan was exhausted but satisfied. The net was closing in on Olivia and Adrian, but he knew the most dangerous part was yet to come. As if on cue, Olivia breezed into the house, a forced cheeriness in her voice. "Honey, I'm home, and I've got a surprise for you." Ethan's guard immediately went up. "Oh, what's that?" Olivia's smile was brittle as she handed him a brochure. "I've booked us a little getaway for our anniversary next month. A lovely cabin in the mountains. Just the two of us, no distractions. What do you think?" Ethan's blood ran cold as he examined the brochure. This had to be it, the accident they'd been planning for him. His mind raced, trying to formulate a response that wouldn't give away his knowledge. "Wow, that's unexpected," he managed, forcing a smile. "It looks great, honey. Thanks for setting this up." Olivia beamed, but Ethan could see the calculation behind her eyes. "I'm so glad you like it. I thought we could use some time to reconnect, you know?" As Olivia chattered on about the amenities at the cabin, Ethan's mind whirled. He needed to find out more details about this trip without arousing suspicion, and he needed a fail-safe in case things went wrong. Later that night, as Olivia slept, Ethan composed a timed email to Samantha. In it, he detailed everything he knew about Olivia and Adrian's crimes, including his suspicions about their plans for him on the upcoming trip. He set it to send automatically if he didn't check in within 24 hours of their scheduled return date. It felt morbid, writing what amounted to a dead man's switch. But Ethan knew he had to be prepared for every eventuality. He wouldn't let Olivia and Adrian get away with their crimes, even if the worst should happen to him. As he closed his laptop, a steely resolve settled over Ethan. He'd been reactive for too long, always one step behind Olivia and Adrian's machinations. It was time to take control of the situation. Tomorrow, he decided, he would start subtly manipulating Olivia into revealing more about their upcoming getaway. He'd use every scrap of information to bolster his counterplan, and when the time came, he'd be ready. The night before their anniversary trip, Ethan sat in the darkened living room, a tumbler of whiskey untouched on the coffee table before him. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of settling wood. Upstairs, Olivia slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. Ethan's fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the arm of his chair as he waited. He'd made sure Olivia's wine at dinner was a little stronger than usual, ensuring she'd turn in early. Now, with the clock ticking closer to midnight, He steeled himself for what was to come. His phone buzzed softly. A text from Samantha. Everything's in place. You're sure about this? Ethan's jaw clenched as he typed his response. No choice. It has to be tonight. He pocketed the phone and stood, moving silently through the house he'd once considered a sanctuary. Now it felt like a tomb, filled with the ghosts of broken promises and shattered trust. In the master bedroom, Olivia stirred as Ethan flicked on the lights. She blinked groggily, confusion giving way to alarm as she registered the hard set of his features. Ethan? What's going on? She mumbled, sitting up. We need to talk, Olivia, Ethan said, his voice cold and steady. About your affair with Adrian, about the money you've been stealing, about your plans to kill me. Olivia's eyes widened, a flicker of panic quickly masked by indignation. What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind? Ethan almost laughed at the irony. How many times had she used that exact phrase to make him doubt himself? But not this time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of photos, tossing them onto the bed. Recognize these? He asked as Olivia's face drained of color. Or how about this? He played a recording on his phone, Olivia's own voice discussing embezzle funds with Adrian. That's not what it sounds like, Olivia stammered, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. Save it, Ethan snapped. I know everything, Olivia. Every lie, every stolen dollar. Every plan you and Adrian cooked up, including your little scheme for our anniversary trip. Olivia's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes as she launched into a frantic denial. Ethan, please, you don't understand. It's not what you think. Adrian and I, we were just what? Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. Just stealing millions from sick people? Just planning to frame me for your crimes? Just plotting to murder me? The weight of evidence was overwhelming. As Ethan laid out detail after damning detail, Olivia's denials grew weaker. Finally, faced with irrefutable proof of her misdeeds, she crumbled. I'm sorry, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never meant for it to go this far. Adrian, he said it would be easy, that no one would get hurt. Ethan felt a twinge of pity, quickly swallowed by a wave of disgust. No one would get hurt? What about the patients whose care suffered because of your greed? What about our marriage? What about me, Olivia? You were going to kill me. Olivia's head snapped up, a calculating gleam replacing the tears in her eyes. Kill you? Don't be ridiculous. I love you, Ethan. This is all just a big misunderstanding. We can work through this, can't we? For better or worse, remember? Ethan watched as Olivia cycled through tactics. Pleading for forgiveness gave way to threats of ruining his reputation. When that failed to sway him, she tried to shift blame, painting herself as Adrian's unwitting victim. But Ethan stood firm, unmoved by her manipulations. It's over, Olivia. I've already given copies of everything to the police and the hospital board. They're expecting my statement first thing in the morning. Olivia's face contorted with rage. You bastard! Do you have any idea what you've done? I'll destroy you for this. I swear to God. No, you won't, Ethan said calmly, holding up his phone. Because I've been recording this entire conversation. One more piece of evidence to add to the pile. All fight drained from Olivia then. She slumped back against the headboard, defeated. What happens now? She asked in a small voice. Now I'm leaving, Ethan replied. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll be testifying against you and Adrian in court. What happens to you after that is up to the justice system. He turned to go, pausing at the doorway to look back at the woman he'd once loved more than life itself. She seemed small and pathetic now, a far cry from the confident, caring partner he'd thought he married. Goodbye, Olivia, he said softly. Then he walked out, leaving her alone with the ruins of her carefully constructed web of lies. As Ethan's car pulled away from the house, he felt a curious mix of emotions. Relief, certainly. Anger still simmered beneath the surface. but mostly he felt lighter, as if he'd set down a burden he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. He checked his phone, seeing a flurry of messages from Samantha. "It's done," he texted back. "Meeting the board at 9 a.m. See you there." The next morning dawned bright and clear, at odds with the storm of emotions roiling inside Ethan. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and pushed open the doors to the hospital's main conference room. Inside, a grim-faced group awaited him. The hospital board sat at one end of the long table, their expressions a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. At the other end, a pair of stone-faced detectives conferred in low voices. Samantha rose to greet him, squeezing his arm in silent support. "Ready?" she murmured. Ethan nodded, setting his briefcase on the table. "As I'll ever be." For the next 3 hours, Ethan laid out his case. He presented financial records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations, a mountain of evidence that left no doubt about Olivia and Adrian's guilt. The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to horror as the full scope of the embezzlement scheme became clear. Millions of dollars, siphoned away from patient care, research funding, and employee pensions. "My God," breathed Dr. Eleanor Patel, the board's chairwoman. "How did we miss this?" "They were clever," Ethan explained. "Used a network of shell companies, falsified records. But once you know what to look for," he spread his hands, indicating the damning evidence before them. As the meeting wound down, Dr. Patel stood, her face etched with determination. "Mr. Hawthorne, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for bringing this to our attention. Rest assured, we will be taking immediate action. Dr. Blackwood and Mrs. Hawthorne are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation." The detectives approached next, peppering Ethan with questions about his evidence and methods. He answered as best he could, acutely aware of the fine line he'd walked in gathering some of his proof. Finally, as the room began to clear, Samantha pulled Ethan aside. "You did good in there," she said softly. "But this is just the beginning. Are you ready for what comes next?" Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the past few months pressing down on him. "I have to be," he replied. "For all the people they hurt. For myself." Samantha nodded, a spark of admiration in her eyes. "Well, you won't be doing it alone. I've been thinking we should set up some kind of support system for the other victims. Legal aid, counseling, that sort of thing. What do you say?" A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. "I say let's get to work." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan and Samantha threw themselves into organizing support for the victims of Olivia and Adrian's fraud. They set up a hotline, arranged pro bono legal consultations, and coordinated with therapists willing to offer discounted services. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As news of the scandal broke, Ethan found himself besieged by reporters hungry for details. Worse were the calls and messages from Olivia's family and friends, alternating between pleas for him to drop the charges and vicious attacks on his character. "You never deserved her anyway," Olivia's sister snarled in one particularly nasty voicemail. "She was too good for you. You'll regret this. You backstabbing piece of shit." Ethan deleted the message with a weary sigh. He'd expected backlash, but the relentless nature of it was wearing him down. "You okay?" Samantha asked, noticing his furrowed brow as they pored over case files one evening. Ethan managed a wan smile. "Just tired. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it, you know?" Samantha's eyes flashed with determination. "It is. Think of all the people you're helping, the lives you're putting back together. That's worth everything." Her words bolstered Ethan's resolve. He threw himself back into their work with renewed vigor, focusing on the good they were doing rather than the negativity swirling around him. Slowly but surely, progress was made. The support group grew, with victims finding solace and strength in shared experiences. The legal team, spearheaded by Samantha, began building a rock-solid case against Olivia and Adrian. And through it all, Ethan found himself growing, The betrayal and pain were still there, a dull ache in his chest. But alongside it bloomed something new, a sense of purpose, of righteous anger channeled into positive action. He began to rediscover parts of himself he'd thought long lost. The passionate teacher, temporarily buried under the weight of suspicion and fear, reemerged. His students noticed a change, responding with increased engagement and enthusiasm. One afternoon, as Ethan wrapped up a particularly lively discussion on the civil rights movement, he caught Daryl grinning at him from the doorway. "What?" Ethan asked as the last student filed out. Daryl shook his head, still smiling. "Nothing, man. It's just good to see the old Ethan back, you know?" Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Yeah," he replied softly. "It's good to be back." As the months wore on and the case against Olivia and Adrian built, Ethan found himself settling into a new normal. The pain of betrayal gradually dulled, replaced by a steely determination to see justice done. Finally, 6 months after that fateful night of confrontation, the trial began. Ethan sat ramrod straight in the witness box, his voice steady as he recounted the sordid details of Olivia and Adrian's crimes. He could feel their eyes boring into him from the defense table, but he refused to look their way. Instead, he focused on the jury, on the victims filling the gallery behind them. With each piece of evidence presented, each damning fact laid bare, Ethan saw a weight lift from their shoulders. This was why he'd fought so hard. This was what made it all worthwhile. As he stepped down from the stand, Ethan caught Samantha's eye. She gave him a small nod, a gesture packed with pride and solidarity. In that moment, Ethan realized something had shifted between them. The long hours working side by side, the shared mission of justice. It had forged a connection deeper than mere friendship. The trial stretched on for weeks, a painstaking unraveling of Olivia and Adrian's web of deceit. But in the end, justice prevailed. The jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts, and the judge's sentence was appropriately severe. As Olivia was led away in handcuffs, she locked eyes with Ethan one last time. Ethan felt a chapter of his life closing, but rather than sadness, he felt only relief and a burgeoning sense of possibility. In the weeks that followed, life took on a brighter hue. The school board, impressed by Ethan's integrity and perseverance throughout the ordeal, offered him the long-coveted position of department head. He accepted with a mixture of pride and humility, vowing to use the role to inspire his students as he'd been inspired by the pursuit of justice. But Ethan's ambitions didn't stop there. Using a portion of the recovered funds awarded to him in the civil suit, he established a foundation dedicated to supporting victims of financial fraud and domestic deception. The work was challenging but deeply rewarding, a way to transform his pain into something positive. And through it all, Samantha remained by his side. What had begun as a professional relationship slowly blossomed into something more. They took things slow, both wary of rushing into anything after the turmoil of the past year. But there was no denying the spark between them, the deep understanding forged in the crucible of shared struggle. One evening, as they walked hand in hand to the park near Ethan's new apartment, Samantha turned to him with a soft smile. "You know, when you called me that day, I never imagined we'd end up here," she said. Ethan chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Believe me, neither did I, but I'm glad we did." They paused, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "What are you thinking?" Samantha asked, noticing the pensive look on Ethan's face. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I'm thinking about how far I've come," he said finally. "A year ago, I was lost, drowning in lies and betrayal. Now," he gestured expansively, encompassing the park, the foundation, Samantha herself. "Now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Samantha leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You're stronger than you know, Ethan Hawthorne. You took something terrible and turned it into a force for good. I'm proud of you, and I'm excited to see what you do next." Ethan wrapped his arm around her, feeling a surge of warmth and hope. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time, he was eager to see where it might lead. As they turned to head home, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The pain, the struggle, the moments of despair, they had all shaped him, forged him into someone stronger and wiser than he'd been before. He'd lost much, it was true, but he'd gained so much more. Purpose, self-respect, and a chance at true happiness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ethan knew he was ready to face them not alone, but with allies by his side and a newfound strength in his heart. The sun dipped below the horizon, and Ethan Hawthorne stepped forward into his future, ready to write the next chapter of his life. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Alistair White. I'm 45 and currently going through a divorce. I have 2 adult children, aged 22 and 20 at the time this all unfolded, and let me tell you, I was not in a good place when it happened. It was a Saturday, and since I wasn't working, I decided to help my wife, Laura, with the housework since she wasn't feeling well. I vacuumed the family room, unloaded the dryer, and was in the middle of transferring laundry from the washer to the dryer when I accidentally knocked over the trash can in the laundry room. After muttering a few choice words, I started cleaning up the mess when I came across something that left me stunned. A couple of used protection. I was shocked, furious, and completely at a loss. Laura and I hadn't used protection in over 15 years. Back then, we only used them briefly when she had developed a yeast infection. Besides, I had a vasectomy 18 years ago, so there was no need for any other form of birth control. Our kids hadn't visited us in weeks, so I immediately ruled out the possibility that they were responsible. The discovery left me reeling. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something. My first decision was to leave, at least for a little while. I headed into the bedroom and grabbed a suitcase, making sure not to wake Laura. She really was unwell, and despite how angry I was, I couldn't ignore the fact that I still loved her. I quietly packed enough clothes to last me a few days. Then I went back to the kitchen, took the protection and my wedding ring, and placed them on the table. After a deep breath, I sat down and wrote Laura a note, pouring out everything I was feeling. It said, "Laura, what you see on the table represents what remains of our marriage. I'm deeply sorry if I wasn't enough for you. I never realized you felt the need for something beyond us. I'm leaving for a few days to think and decide what I'm going to do next. Please don't try to contact me during this time. I will reach out when I'm ready to talk. If you choose not to tell the kids what's happened and they ask me, I won't hold anything back. The same applies to our parents. I ask one thing of you. Please take the time to truly consider how much this has hurt me. When we talk, I will expect honest answers. Some of my questions will be difficult, not because you won't know the answers, but because I will insist on hearing them, even if it's hard for you to say. If you don't want to answer them when the time comes, just tell me. I won't allow this betrayal to continue. If you're unwilling to end your relationship with your lover, let me know when I reach out. If that's the case, I'll step away from your life. Lastly, this act has not only defiled our marriage, but also our home. If we're to rebuild, selling this house will be necessary. Despite everything, I still love you. But this is a nearly fatal wound to our marriage. Alistair." I loaded up my truck and drove away, possibly for the last time. The weight of everything hit me hard, and I had to pull over several times to wipe my eyes and regain composure. I wasn't paying much attention to where I was going at first, but I eventually realized I was heading toward the cabin my grandfather had left me. It was the perfect retreat. No phone, no cell service, and no internet. A place where I could think clearly and sort through my emotions. Without hesitation, I turned off my cell phone and kept driving. For the next 3 weeks, the cabin became my refuge. I stayed there, except for going to work, and made it clear to my workplace that I wasn't taking any non-business calls. During my lunch breaks in town, I took steps to protect myself financially. I moved some of the money from our joint savings into separate accounts to ensure at least half of it would be secure. Laura hadn't worked in years, so I knew that if we ended up divorcing, it would be costly for me. Thankfully, my grandfather's trust fund and the cabin were protected assets, giving me some peace of mind. After weeks of reflection, the raw intensity of my emotions began to settle, and I made my decision. On my way back toward town, I turned my phone back on once I got within range. When I checked my messages, I saw missed calls from about 10 different people. In addition to Laura, there were calls from my kids, our minister, both sets of parents, and a few numbers I didn't recognize. Finally ready to confront what awaited me, I dialed home. When Laura answered the phone, I asked her directly if she was ready to answer my questions truthfully. Her response was immediate and unexpected. She burst into sobs, telling me that the police had been looking for me as a missing person and had questioned her to see if she'd harmed me. I waited for her to calm down, but when she finally stopped rambling, I repeated my question. Was she ready to give me honest answers? Instead of answering, she started babbling again. Frustrated and unable to get through to her, I hung up the phone. Next, I called my kids. Ethan, my eldest, answered. His first question stunned me. He wanted to know what I had done to make me run away. I was taken aback and asked him if that's what Laura had told him. When he confirmed, I told him that if he believed it, there was no point in continuing the conversation. I then explained to him what I had found in the trash that day and asked if he or his sister, Megan, had been to the house that week. He said he hadn't been there and wasn't sure about Megan. He mentioned that the last time he'd spoken with her, she had just broken up with her boyfriend and hadn't been seeing anyone since. Ethan's tone was cautious, but I could sense he was trying to piece everything together as much as I was. I called Megan next, and her response was nearly identical to Ethan's. It became clear that Laura hadn't told either of them the truth about what was going on, which only reignited my anger. Determined to set the record straight, I called the police station. I informed them that I had never been missing, explaining that I hadn't been in contact with my wife due to serious personal issues between us. When I mentioned that Laura knew I wasn't missing, they told me that she had filed the report herself. They said they would review the situation and consult the prosecutor about the possibility of filing charges for a false police report. After dealing with the police, I called both sets of parents. My parents, as I expected, supported me wholeheartedly. Laura's parents, on the other hand, immediately accused me of lying and berated me for hurting Laura. Their hostility didn't surprise me, but it was still exhausting. By then, I'd had enough. I made a stop at my boss's house, handed him my resignation, and let him know I was taking time to focus on personal matters. With that done, I headed back toward the cabin. Before I could get out of cell range, Laura called. I pulled over and answered. Her tone was calmer now, and she simply asked when I planned to come home. Still fuming over being painted as the bad guy, I answered her firmly. I will come back to your love nest when, and only when, you tell everyone the truth. I will not be made the villain here. I didn't cheat on you. Those protection weren't mine, and I will not accept that house as my home anymore. Laura sniffled on the other end before asking in a shaky voice, Where have you been? Why haven't you come home? Why? I cut her off. It is not my home anymore, Laura. Get that through your head. You don't need to know where I've been because you gave up the right to know when you cheated. I quit my job today, I continued. So, you won't be able to call me there. And where I'm headed now, you don't need to find me. I'm not coming back. Taking a breath, I added, You should probably file for divorce because you can't sell the house without my signature, and I won't be paying the mortgage or utilities anymore. I waited for her response, but there was only silence on the line. Then the sound of a dial tone. With that, I shut off my phone, got back on the road, and drove straight toward the cabin. On the way, I stopped at the diner in the small village near the cabin for supper. After eating, I headed to the cabin, where I settled in for the night. The next morning, I drove back to the village and stopped at the local post office to rent a P.O. box and update my mailing address. While in town, I noticed that our bank had a branch there, so I went in, identified myself, and informed them that I would be managing my accounts from their location moving forward. With those tasks handled, I called a close friend of mine who happens to be an attorney. I explained the situation and everything I had done so far. He assured me that I had taken the right steps to protect myself and advised me to keep documenting everything. An idea struck me, so I decided to call one of our neighbors, a well-known busybody. I asked if she'd noticed any unfamiliar cars at the house recently. She eagerly shared that a bright red, flashy sports car had been parked in our driveway several times, often staying for hours at a time. She didn't know the make or model, but mentioned the car had a vanity license plate reading, Christ's number 1. I thanked her and then asked if she'd be willing to leave me a message on my cell phone if the car appeared again. Knowing her fondness for gossip, I figured she'd not only comply, but that the story would soon spread throughout the neighborhood. Remembering that the minister had called, I decided to return his call. When he answered, I asked what he wanted when he called earlier. Without missing a beat, he asked why I had abandoned my wife. I couldn't help but laugh before replying, Why don't you tell me about your red Corvette? When was the last time you paid her a visit? There was a long silence on the line before I heard the unmistakable click of a dial tone. Next, I called Laura. I told her she could leave messages on my cell phone, and I'd respond when I was back in range. Before hanging up, I added one parting shot. By the way, Laura, is the minister's tool better than mine? There was a sharp gasp, a choked sob, and then silence as the call disconnected. After that, I called my lawyer again and updated him on the situation. I explained the neighbor's observations about the minister's red Corvette, how both he and Laura reacted to my pointed questions, and how all signs seemed to point to him being the unknown depositor of the protection. I then instructed my lawyer to file for a legal separation citing adultery as the reason, and to also prepare divorce papers naming the minister as a correspondent. I reasoned that filing both would offer Laura a choice. She could either contest the divorce or accept the separation, which she couldn't fight. My lawyer agreed and assured me the paperwork would be handled promptly. I wasn't entirely prepared for the fallout my actions caused, though I wasn't surprised, or unhappy, for that matter. Our busybody neighbor wasted no time spreading the story about the red Corvette, and since several church deacons lived nearby, it didn't take long for the minister to face the consequences. He was swiftly fired. As for Laura, things spiraled even further. She turned out to be pregnant, was arrested for filing a false police report, and later suffered a miscarriage. Meanwhile, my son Ethan initially took Laura's side, which only fueled my anger. After I ignored his calls for over a month, he finally reached out using Megan's phone. When he told me Laura had admitted the truth, I felt a mix of vindication and lingering bitterness. Raw from the whole ordeal, I couldn't resist delivering a jab. I told Ethan that I was still furious and, in a moment of cruel spite, mentioned that I was going to get DNA tests from him and Megan to confirm their paternity. I even added that, if it turned out they weren't mine, I would sue their biological father for back child support. My words cut deep. Ethan broke down in tears and hung up. Of course, I knew the kids were mine, thanks to DNA testing the school required for a health program years ago. Still, I was so emotionally raw that I lashed out, punishing Ethan for siding with his mother. Realizing I'd gone too far, I called Megan and explained what I'd said. I also asked her to encourage Ethan to call me again so I could apologize properly. The prosecutor dropped the charges against Laura after I requested it, a small act of mercy on my part, though it didn't erase the pain of everything that had happened. Laura, realizing the inevitable, signed the divorce papers. She moved out of town, likely to escape the reputation that followed her actions, and perhaps to start anew somewhere far from the mess she'd created. As for me, I took a few deep breaths and started the process of moving forward. I moved back into the house, but things were different now. I couldn't just continue living in the same space without making some changes. The emotional weight of the past lingered in every corner, so I decided to make a fresh start in my own way. I got new beds for all the bedrooms, symbolic of wiping the slate clean. It was a simple change, but it gave me a sense of control, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Megan, who had always been the responsible and nurturing one, decided that I wasn't going to be left alone in my recovery. She suggested I needed a housekeeper to help with the daily chores, something I hadn't even thought about. She moved back into the house to oversee things and make sure I didn't go down the same self-destructive path that I had in the past. Megan never did date again. When I asked her if she had thoughts about finding someone, she looked at me and simply said that no one could ever measure up to the kind of man she wanted. No one is as good as my daddy, she told me one evening. It struck me in a way I hadn't expected. On one hand, it made me proud, but on the other, it also reminded me of the responsibility I had to be the man I wanted her to see, the one who deserved to be admired. Then, out of the blue, my old boss called. It had been a while since we'd spoken, and I hadn't expected to hear from him. He offered me a promotion, a new position with a significant increase in responsibility, and the best part was that it allowed me to telecommute. It felt like a lifeline, a fresh opportunity to take control of my career without sacrificing my personal life. The flexibility would allow me to be there more for Megan, and to keep the space I'd carved out for myself after everything that had happened. Life was slowly starting to feel good again. I had my health, my family, and the chance to rebuild in ways I hadn't even imagined. The pain was still there, but I was learning to manage it, to not let it define me anymore. The future looked brighter than it had in a long time. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Katie often felt nostalgic for her youth. Memories of carefree days under the Florida sun filled her thoughts, especially when she was alone. Growing up in a small town with familiar faces and routines contrasted sharply with her complex adult life. As she navigated life's challenges, Katie reflected on past relationships and the lessons they taught her. Each encounter and heartbreak shaped her into the woman she was today, leaving lasting marks on her heart. Katie glanced at the clock, noting it was 1 p.m. on a Saturday. Drinking wine this early was unusual for her, but today was an exception. Her eyes rested on a slender red box on the coffee table, a recent arrival that brought sorrow rather than joy. She took the box to her bedroom, placing it on the bed before opening the closet. After rummaging through shoes and keepsake boxes, she found a plastic case containing rows of boxes in various colors. She added the red box to the row and wondered why she couldn't part with these items. By chance, she opened the third box and found a postcard and a CD. She played the CD, and When I Fall in Love by the Letterman filled the room. She read the card, knowing who had sent it, recalling the time she received it with a large bouquet at work. Her coworkers had gathered around to see who sent the flowers. Katie confidently played the CD, and the office girls teased her, curious about the card's message. She read aloud, "When I give my heart, I give it all. Otherwise, I'll never fall in love. And the moment I feel it, that you feel it too, that's when I fall in love with you." The girls were silent, then returned to work. Grace, one of her colleagues, remarked, "This is a special guy. I'm jealous. Does he have a brother?" Katie smiled, thinking maybe she did have something special. But John Williams, her first love, always lingered in her mind. He had taken her to prom, shared her first closeness moments, and left a lasting impact. After he went to Stanford, their contact dwindled and eventually stopped, leaving Katie heartbroken. She dropped out of school and worked a mundane job at Allstate Insurance. Her days were routine and unfulfilling, with only evening walks with her friend Lisa providing some relief. She hoped to hear from John, but learned he was dating someone else, which explained the silence. Despite the heartbreak, she fantasized about a life with him, imagining herself as Mrs. Dr. John Williams. Though she tried to move on, John's memory lingered, always present in her thoughts. Katie had always been attractive, not conventionally beautiful, but with a natural sensuality that drew men to her. Even while dating John, other men often hit on her. She stood 5'5" with long brown hair parted in the middle. After ending things with John, she had several relationships, but only one lasted 5 months. Her lingering feelings for John made her feel guilty, impacting most of her relationships. At 25, Katie met Tom, who was different from her past boyfriends. Tom had joined the Army at 18, serving in Iraq, Germany, and Afghanistan before retiring. He opened an auto repair shop in Florida near Katie's workplace. Tom first saw Katie when she came in with her friend Lisa. She wore a white low-cut top with black polka dots, a short black miniskirt, and high heels, captivating Tom instantly. "Hi," Katie called out. "Anybody here?" Tom emerged from his office and offered to help with her car, which wouldn't start and was parked nearby. He fixed it quickly by tightening a loose wire. Katie thanked him with a kiss on the cheek and invited him to dinner as repayment. Tom, flustered and intrigued, eagerly accepted. Katie momentarily thought of John but dismissed the regret, feeling a connection with Tom. She gave him her business card, asking him to call for directions. Tom, thrilled, promised to call. As Katie and Lisa left, Lisa expressed concern, but Katie reassured her. She promised to call Lisa after the date for safety. Both laughed, and Katie told Tom to arrive at 7 p.m. He arrived early but waited until exactly 7 to knock. Katie, stirring sauce on the stove, checked her outfit in the mirror and smiled as she heard him knock again, enjoying making him wait. Kathy called out, "I'll be right there." Tom sighed with relief as the door opened, revealing a smiling Kathy. She invited him in, and he handed her a bottle of wine and a small bouquet of flowers. She thanked him, put the flowers in a vase, and he admired her beauty. She wore a white blouse tucked into tight black jeans and was barefoot, which Tom found incredibly alluring. They had chicken cacciatore with spaghetti, made with her homemade sauce. The meal was delicious, and their conversation flowed easily. They shared stories about their pasts and dreams for the future. Tom learned Katie had a college degree and a talent for watercolor painting, with some of her art hanging in her home. Kathy listened to his military service stories, feeling both moved and saddened. Tom revealed he owned 3 auto repair stores, including the one Kathy visited. He had contracts with major rental car companies, the U.S. government, and local businesses. The store where they met was his largest, with 10 bays, including one for high-end cars like Ferraris. Tom was pleased he had forgotten to lock up that day, allowing their meeting to happen. Tom talked about his home, a 3-bedroom house he bought 2 years ago on the outskirts of town. Kathy felt her hunch about him was right. They spent the evening eating, drinking wine, and playing games. As the night ended, Kathy boldly asked Tom to stay longer. Though tempted, he declined, wanting to take things slow and build a genuine connection. Kathy appreciated his approach, seeing it as a promise of something real. Tom went home but couldn't sleep, thinking about Kathy and what they could be doing. Meanwhile, Kathy called Lisa to share the details of the evening, including her bold request and Tom's respectful refusal. Lisa was shocked he turned her down and joked that he must be gay. Kathy laughed, assuring her that his goodnight kiss proved otherwise. Tom tossed and turned while Kathy slept soundly, feeling as if he were with her. 4 months later, Tom realized he loved Kathy, who had known much sooner. A year later, they married in a small ceremony with friends and family and moved into Tom's house on Kensington Street. Kathy was lost in pleasant memories, putting away the disc she had just played. She picked up a gold case special to her, which she received on her wedding day. As she got ready with her bridesmaids, a FedEx courier delivered the box. They found a CD player, and Kathy played the CD while reading the card inside. The song So Much in Love by Times played, bringing tears to her eyes. Her bridesmaid Lisa warned her not to cry and ruin her makeup. Everyone laughed, averting a makeup crisis. At the church, Kathy saw Tom in his tuxedo, feeling proud and lucky. She vowed to make him happy. Remembering this, her smile faded, feeling she had let him down. She quickly put the card and CD back in the gold box and moved on to the silver one. She played a disc from the silver box, recalling their first wedding anniversary. She had prepared all day, including a salon visit and a Brazilian waxing, which Tom had hinted he would love. When Tom arrived home, she descended the stairs, mesmerizing him. He dropped the silver box, and its contents spilled out. He picked it up, knelt in front of her, and handed her a jewelry box, saying, "Happy anniversary, my love." Inside was a 16-inch diamond necklace. Kathy was delighted and asked him to put it on her. She admired it in the mirror, feeling it was the most beautiful gift she had ever received. Tom, overjoyed by her happiness, watched her with love. He then played a CD from the box, completing the memory of their special day. "May I have this dance, beautiful lady?" Tom asked, holding Kathy's hands. "You look stunning tonight." Frank Sinatra's The Way You Look Tonight played in the background. They danced, feeling the love between them. When the song ended, Tom suggested skipping dinner and heading to the bedroom. Kathy laughed. "No way. I've spent too much time and money getting ready. We're going out." Tom persisted. "All I need is you." "We can eat afterward," Kathy replied. "You once said anticipation makes things better." Tom conceded with a smile, knowing he couldn't win this one. They enjoyed a delightful dinner at a Japanese steakhouse, followed by a comedy show, and then danced and talked at a piano bar. On the way home, the anticipation between them was electric. Katie cherished this memory, recalling how perfect the night was. She took out a diamond choker from her jewelry box, kissed it, and felt a tear roll down her cheek. Returning it, she moved to another silver box and played a disc of Nat King Cole's Unforgettable. On their second anniversary, she had surprised Tom by waiting in a sheer negligee. When he arrived, he brought 2 boxes. She insisted on opening the boxes first, revealing a diamond bracelet and earrings. She asked him to put them on her, then handed him a disc to play. They spent the evening enjoying each other's company, ending with pizza and wine. Tom smiled. "This is even better than last year." Kathy agreed, "Maybe we should repeat the workout." They often did, savoring their special moments together. The next morning, Kathy read Tom's message on the card. "Unforgettable in every way and forever. That's how you'll stay. That's why, darling. It's incredible that someone so unforgettable thinks I'm unforgettable too." Katie remembered that night and the pale blue negligee, now lost during the move. She wished she still had it, as it held special memories. Putting away the card and disc, she approached the last white box, avoiding the painful blue ones for now. The last white box represented innocence lost, at least for Tom, as Katie had started seeing John again, her first lover. 5 months after their second anniversary, John, now Dr. Williams, re-entered Kathy's life when he visited her office. The moment they saw each other, old feelings resurfaced. John suggested lunch to catch up, and Kathy agreed, ignoring the disapproving looks from her colleagues who adored Tom and sensed trouble. Kathy's lunch with John was more than a reunion. It reignited her fantasy of him. She told herself it was innocent, but deep down, she knew she was willing to betray her marriage. When she returned, Lisa confronted her, worried about the gossip and implications. Kathy insisted it was just lunch, but Lisa, seeing through her, reminded her of John's past betrayal and warned her about ruining her marriage. Kathy promised to avoid jeopardizing her marriage, but Lisa remained doubtful. Despite the promise, Kathy's desire for John lingered, threatening her relationship with Tom. Lisa, feeling she had done her best, urged Kathy to get back to work. For the first few weeks, Kathy and John just had lunch and pleasant conversations. Then they started having drinks after work when Tom stayed late, which led to date nights with drinks. John took his time, aiming to get Kathy back, unsure if it was love but unbothered by her marriage. Kathy, on the other hand, couldn't resist meeting John when Tom had to travel to Pittsburgh for a business conference. Tom asked Kathy to join him, but she declined, using it as an excuse to see John. While Tom was away for 5 days, John and Kathy spent their time together, completing the betrayal. Once Tom's flight departed, Kathy invited John to their house, and they spent 5 days and 6 nights together in Tom's bed. John, an experienced seducer, quickly won Kathy over. By the end of the week, Kathy planned to leave Tom for John, who would soon move into a new house. Saturday morning, after John left, a florist delivered a bouquet with a white box from Tom. It contained a CD with the song 6 Days on the Road, which Tom had planned as a surprise. Kathy was touched but anxious about keeping her affair secret for 2 weeks. Tom returned home at 4 p.m., eager to see his wife. Expecting a romantic welcome, he was surprised and delighted to find Kathy waiting for him with a kiss and a hug. Tom, filled with anticipation, hoped to fulfill his desires with his wife after 6 days apart. "I'm already tired. Maybe tonight, okay?" Kathy suggested. "Maybe tonight," Tom muttered, confused. Who is this woman? And what has she done to my wife? Feeling dejected, he put away his suitcases, sorted the laundry, and stored the toiletries. He then went to the kitchen, where Kathy was cooking. When he tried to hug her, she pulled away, saying, "Not now. I'm trying to cook. Just leave me alone." Tom, feeling rejected, sat in the living room, pondering the change in his wife. Something had happened while he was away, and she wouldn't talk about it. Kathy felt guilty and couldn't meet his eyes. She peeked into the living room, seeing Tom staring out the window, knowing he suspected something. After dinner, he dragged her to the bedroom. Afterward, he showered, dressed, and left the house, returning only on Sunday night. When he returned, Kathy asked, "Where did you spend the night?" "I had paperwork at the store," he snapped. Kathy said, "I was worried you didn't call." He retorted, "Don't you have a phone? Are your fingers broken?" They said nothing more that evening. Kathy put the disc away, feeling the reunion had gone terribly wrong. She had cheated and felt guilty. She picked up the first of the blue boxes, dreading the pain inside. Opening it, she found a CD, but no card. She inserted the disc, recalling when she received it with a bouquet of lavender flowers, the symbol of distrust. Reluctantly, she played the disc, which began with a Bob Seger song. "I know it's late. I know you're tired. I know I'm not in your plans. All my hopes are fading now we have everything. Let's make it last. Let's find a way. Why don't you stay?" The office girls, having seen her with John, listened disapprovingly. Rose, an older colleague, asked, "Katie, what have you done?" Katie, deciding there was no point in hiding it, said, "I'm leaving Tom. In 2 weeks, I'll be moving in with John." Rose replied, "I think you're making a huge mistake. Your husband is crazy about you. The new man won't last. Stop before it's too late. He already suspects something." Katie said defiantly, "It'll be your loss if he goes." Rose shook her head and left. Grace and Lisa stayed. Grace asked, "Are you really planning on leaving Tom?" Katie angrily replied, "Yes." Grace nodded and walked away. Lisa, disappointed, said, "You didn't take my advice. Don't come crying to me when everything goes to hell." She then left too. Kathy believed her relationship with John would be worth it and felt sure she made the right choice. She put the CD away, thinking about why she hadn't listened to Lisa. In the evening, Kathy came home and criticized Tom for the song, yelling, "Why did you send me this? I'm your wife." "Really?" he hissed. "You seem more interested in someone else on Saturday. The postcard and the disc just matched my thoughts." "You're wrong, Tom, just wrong," she retorted, knowing he was right. She couldn't admit the truth and felt guilty. She brushed away a tear and put the box away, her fingers pausing over the second blue box. She remembered getting that box the day after the Bob Seger song. It was on the porch when she got home. She quickly took it inside to play before John arrived. Inside was a letter from Tom, expressing his heartbreak and confusion. The CD played Ronnie Millsap's "Stranger in My House." Kathy didn't call Tom, stunned by his clarity. She realized she had never told him the truth, avoiding the answer even to herself. Kathy picked up the third blue box, knowing it was the worst. Tom had been spending more nights at the office, leaving her and John with opportunities to meet. One Friday, believing Tom wouldn't be home, she called John to come over. Unbeknownst to her, Tom was planning to come home that night with a CD and flowers to save their marriage. Tom left his store at 8:30, drove home, and saw a strange car in front of his house. He parked a few houses down and quietly entered his home with flowers and a white box. As he walked through the house, he heard voices and the movement of the bed from upstairs. The memory of their first anniversary filled his mind until the noise shattered his hope, turning his mood dark. Tom climbed the stairs, carefully avoiding the creaky fifth step. When he reached the bedroom door, sweat trickled down his face. Slowly opening the door, he saw his worst fears realized. Kathy in bed with another man, John Williams, her first love. Tears filled Tom's eyes. His heart broke. He knew he could confront John, but decided against it, fearing legal consequences and Kathy's potential testimony against him. Instead, he walked downstairs, leaving the flowers and the broken CD on the kitchen table, then slammed the door as he left. Upstairs, Kathy heard the noise and asked John, "Did you hear that?" John dismissed it, wanting to continue. Kathy insisted, got up, put on her robe, and went downstairs. Seeing the flowers and broken CD, she realized Tom knew. She felt terrible, having never meant to hurt him this way, though she had planned to leave him. John came down, saw the flowers, and sneered, "How pathetic." Kathy didn't agree, but said nothing. Tom stayed away for a week, and John practically moved in. Kathy regretted not having that broken disc, as it symbolized the beginning of her downfall. She inserted a disc into the player, reading the card. Roy Orbison's Running Scared played, with a message asking, "Will you leave with him, or will you stay with me?" She recalled receiving the box, delivered by courier with no flowers. At work, her colleagues urged her to play the CD, but she refused, knowing the blue box signaled bad news. After work, sitting in her car, Kathy hesitated to open the box. Her friend Lisa and a colleague, Rose, approached and offered to listen with her without judgment. Kathy agreed, letting them into the car. In silence, she played the disc and read the card, sharing the painful moment with her friends. Lisa cried as she read the card and listened to the song, feeling Tom's pain and fear of losing Kathy. He had poured his heart out and informed her that he would be returning home on Saturday morning, asking her to decide by then. At the end of the card, he wrote, "I hope you choose me." Rose asked, "Kathy, what are your plans?" "I'm leaving with John on Saturday morning," Kathy replied. Rose nodded sadly. "I wish I had a man who loved me enough to ask me back even after cheating." Katie replied, "Rose, haven't you been divorced twice?" "Yes," Rose said, "but I realized too late that Chet, my first husband, was the love of my life." "I believe John is the one for me," Kathy insisted. Lisa thanked Kathy for sharing and promised secrecy. Kathy returned home to discuss plans with John. "Leave and let him come home to an empty house," John suggested. "I owe it to him to tell him face to face," Kathy insisted. "Do it by Saturday," John instructed. At 9:45 a.m. on Saturday, Kathy sat at the kitchen table with packed suitcases by the door. Tom arrived at 10 o'clock, saw the suitcases, and knew her decision. Ignoring her, he got a beer and sat across from her. "I guess you've answered the question," he said. "What question?" Kathy asked. "You're leaving with him," Tom replied. "Yes," she admitted. "Then it's useless to fight for you." "I'm sorry, Tom," she whispered. "I think it's time for you to get out of my house," he said coldly. "Will you help me take my stuff outside?" "It's your decision to go. Carry your damn bags yourself," Tom replied. Shocked, Kathy carried her bags to the porch and texted John to pick her up. She wanted to explain, but Tom had shut her out. As she looked back at the house, she saw Tom sobbing silently in the kitchen. When he noticed her, he angrily removed her rings and threw them on the table. Tom walked to the window, met her eyes, and slowly closed the blinds, filled with hate. Kathy feared for both Tom and John, knowing Tom wouldn't be easily defeated. John arrived, loudly insulting Tom as he carried Kathy's bags. Kathy was relieved Tom didn't confront John as they drove away. "I hoped we could part as friends," Kathy thought, but that was not to be. She tried to put the confrontation behind her and felt happy to be with her long-lost love, John, ready to start a new life and make him happy. Kathy placed the disc and card back into the blue box and returned it to its place. "It's ironic," she mused. She had told Tom she would do everything to make him happy, but it failed. She pulled out the next blue box, remembering it painfully well. It contained a CD, but no card, reminding her of Tom's cousin Janice and her wedding day. At the wedding, Janice had confronted Kathy, asking if she truly loved Tom and warning her not to hurt him. Janice had shared Tom's painful past, losing his mother to cancer at 7, his father's subsequent problem with drinking booze and end of life, and feeling like a burden to his adoptive family. Tom had grown up isolated and tough, with a reputation for fighting. Kathy recalled Janice mentioning Tom's scars. Tom had told Kathy they were from military shrapnel, except for a knife wound from defending Janice in a bar fight. Janice recounted the incident. Tom had saved her from 2 aggressive men at a bar, cementing her protective feelings towards him. Kathy had never known this about Tom and felt even more love for him, promising Janice she would never hurt him. Reflecting on this, Kathy thought with regret, "This was another promise I had not kept." Kathy remembered the day that box had arrived at her office. It came via FedEx the Monday after their confrontation. There were no flowers this time. She figured Tom thought she no longer deserved them. After work, she played the CD for Lisa and Rosa in the car. The song had no card, so they asked about its meaning. Kathy shared her story, her family's end of lives, her loveless upbringing, and how Tom had given her the love and acceptance she never had. The Bee Gees' To Love Somebody played, "There's a light, a certain light that never shone on me before. In my brain, I see your face again. I'm a man, can't you see what I'm like? I live and breathe for you. But what good is that if I don't have you? Don't have you, baby. You don't know what it's like to love someone the way I love you." Tears streamed down Kathy's cheeks as she finally understood. She was the light Tom needed, but she had stolen his love. Regret filled her. If she had known then what she knew now, she would still be married to Tom. She put the box back and pulled out the last white box, recalling its arrival the Friday after the Bee Gees CD. As Kathy, Lisa, and Rosa left work, they heard someone yell, "Kathy, wait!" Turning, they saw Tom running towards them in his usual tight blue jeans, blue short-sleeve shirt, and work boots. Kathy admitted to herself that he looked good. Rose whispered, "If he were mine, I don't think I could throw him back." Kathy shot her a scornful look as Tom approached, holding a white box in his left hand. "Hi," Tom said. Kathy watched him look her over, starting at her knees and slowly rising to her eyes. After a moment, he turned to Rose and Lisa, nodding in greeting. They nodded back. Tom then said to Kathy, "You look good." "Thank you," Kathy replied. An awkward silence followed. Finally, Tom spoke. "Kathy, I need to talk to you for a few minutes. Do you mind?" "I don't know, Tom. I have to go home. John will be waiting for me," Kathy replied. "It will only take a few minutes. Surely you can spare 5 minutes for an old friend." Realizing he didn't want to fight, Kathy agreed. Tom asked Rose and Lisa, "I want to talk to Kathy alone. I hope you don't mind." He began walking Kathy to her car, but Rose and Lisa followed. Noticing this, Tom smiled and said, "Looks like I'll have to do this in front of you." Turning to Kathy, he said, "Please let me finish without interrupting. I have to say everything, or I won't be able to finish, okay?" Kathy nodded. Tom began, "I know I don't have a college degree, and I'm not good at expressing my feelings. I've tried to show my love through songs and meaningful lyrics, but I failed. I loved you more than you'll ever know, and was happy with our life. I didn't see your unhappiness, and I'm sorry. I want you to have this." He handed her a box. "This is my last gift to you. If you don't respond to the song, I won't bother you again. I'll never come to your workplace or your new home. If I see you on the street, it will be random. If your car breaks down, you can bring it in, and I'll charge you this time." Kathy smiled, remembering their first meeting. "That's all I wanted to say," he added. He started to leave, but then turned back. "One more thing. Thank you for 3 wonderful years, the best of my life. I'll always remember you with love." Finally, Tom addressed Rose and Lisa. "Ladies, I'm glad Kathy has friends like you. I know you'll look out for her. I'm surprised you think I'd do anything to hurt her." His voice broke at hurt, but he continued, "This is goodbye. I wish you both the best." Rose, crying, hugged Tom and promised to let him know if anyone bothered Kathy. Lisa did the same. Tom walked away without looking back, hiding his tears. Rose turned to Kathy and said, "If you let him go after that, John must be decent." Lisa, who thought John was a cretin, shook her head, still believing Kathy was making a mistake. The 3 of them got into Kathy's car to listen to the CD. Once again, there was no card or note. Kathy hesitated before inserting it into the player, looking at Rose and Lisa, and asked, Should I listen to it? Lisa replied, Suit yourself. I'm not getting involved. Rose spoke up. After he poured his heart out, you owe it to yourself to listen. You owe him that. Kathy, driven by curiosity, slid the disc into the player. The Beatles' That Boy played. Tom felt it captured his situation perfectly. Someone had taken Kathy from him. John wanted her, but not like Tom did. Despite her betrayal, Tom would still take her back, believing John would eventually hurt her. As Kathy listened to the song, she realized its significance. Tom and the Beatles were right. That boy took my love away. She didn't understand or believe it then. Tom's efforts to communicate through songs had failed. She placed the Beatles' record back, remembering Tom's words. Kathy recalled receiving the first white box on a Sunday morning while heading to the mall with Lisa. Tom had planned a picnic for the afternoon, and Kathy wanted new clothes. As they drove, Lisa asked, "How's it going with your mechanic?" Kathy, annoyed, replied, "He's not just a mechanic. He has his own business." "Calm down, I was joking." "So, what's going on between you two?" Lisa asked. "He loves me. I can tell by the way he smiles when he sees me. He always takes care of my car and waits for me with lunch. He's protective and treats me well," Kathy said. "And how do you know that?" Lisa inquired. "He hasn't said it yet, but I think he's waiting for me to make the first move. He's shy around women." "And you? Do you love him?" Lisa asked. "I'm not sure. It's been so long since I felt anything like love," Kathy replied. "Not being sure won't work with a guy like Tom. You need to be certain. Do you love him?" Lisa pressed. Kathy hesitated. "I think I do, but John is still on my mind." Lisa, frustrated with hearing about John, said, "John deceived you. He left and never came back. Tom loves you and is here. If you want to keep him, you need to make up your mind soon, or you'll lose him." Kathy thought about Lisa's words. She believed she loved Tom, but couldn't shake thoughts of John. Still, she didn't want to lose Tom, knowing he was the best for her. That evening, Kathy prepared for their date at River Park. Tom brought food, wine, and a blanket for their picnic. They had a great day, but Tom had to leave early for a business meeting with Avis. "I know you have to go. Will you call me tomorrow after the meeting?" Kathy asked. Tom kissed her. "You can count on it." After he left, Kathy changed into comfortable clothes. Later, the doorbell rang. Surprised, she saw Tom at the door and opened it. Pleasantly surprised. "Did you forget something?" Kathy asked, panting. "Yes, you," he replied. He embraced her and kissed her. Then he stepped back and held a thin white box for her to see. "Tomorrow, I meet an influential business partner. I can speak confidently with him, but with you, I struggle," Tom stuttered. He handed her the box and said, "I hope this shows how I feel. Call me anytime." Kathy took the box and watched him drive away. Inside, she found a CD and a note. She inserted the CD and a Randy Travis song played. "Can I trust you with my heart?" The note had the same line. That night, she called Tom and said, "Yes." Tom asked, "What?" "You can trust me with your heart," she replied. "I'll be right back," Tom shouted into the phone. He rushed back, picked her up, and carried her inside. "I love you, Kathy," he said. "I feel the same way," Kathy replied. They made love for the first time that night, but she hadn't said, "I love you too." Remembering that night, Kathy cried, realizing she had loved him all along, but it was too late. Kathy set aside the white box and pulled out the black one. It had been 3 weeks since she last spoke to Tom. True to her word, she hadn't seen or heard from him. Friday morning, John asked, "Want to go out to eat tonight? How about Kelly's downtown?" "No," Kathy snapped. "Tom and I used to go there. Let's try the new bar and grill near your work. I'll drive you and pick you up at 5. John agreed, and they went to Easton Ave, a new pub. The waitress and bartender seemed contemptuous as they entered. They sat in a back booth, and Kathy was shocked to see Tom walk in and sit at the bar. "Did you know he was coming?" she asked John. "No, of course not," he replied, smirking. Kathy knew he was lying. John got up, went to the bar, and pretended to notice Tom. "Hey, buddy, I didn't see you there." Tom just looked at him and went back to his drink. John smirked. "Don't get upset. She picked the best man, and it wasn't you." Tom replied, "Yeah, she picked you." John laughed and said, "That's right. She chose me over you," then walked away. Kathy was horrified. Tom didn't deserve this. She watched him finish his drink and approach her. The bartender told Tom his drink was on the house. Tom got up, walked over to Kathy, and faced her. "That was low, Kathy, even for you. Did you enjoy seeing me humiliated? I promised not to bother you, and I didn't. Do I get it now? You two were made for each other." Tom said with disgust. I didn't know anything about this. You have to believe me. I didn't know you'd be here or that he'd do this, Kathy pleaded. Why should I believe you after what you did? I don't trust you and I don't like him, Tom snapped. John walked over, grinning. Are you still here? Tom just stared at him, his hand clenched into a fist. Kathy recalled Tom teaching her how to punch properly, and she noticed fear flicker in John's eyes. A waitress approached with drinks. This is no place for that, Tom. Without taking his eyes off John, Tom said, You're probably right, Amanda. Tom backed away, then left the pub. John followed him to the exit, watching him go. Amanda placed the drinks on the table and said, So you dumped Tom for that idiot? This is the third time he's done this to Tom. She walked away, shaking her head. When John returned, visibly upset, he demanded, What did he talk to you about? Before Kathy could respond, a man approached their table. I'm Paul. I was at your wedding with Tom, he said. I'm sorry, I don't remember you, Kathy replied. I'm Tom's friend. Tonight's meal is on the house, but you need to leave immediately and never come back, Paul said. Kathy's face turned red with embarrassment. John laughed. Paul continued. Tom won't cause trouble, but if he sees you again, run. He won't be merciful. John smirked. I'm not afraid of him. Don't say you weren't warned, Paul replied. Kathy ate in silence, furious with John for setting up Tom. She had liked Paul and his wife and wished she could come back, but John hadn't left a tip. That night, Kathy and John had their first serious fight. John was furious, unable to understand why she sided with Tom. Kathy realized John couldn't keep Tom away if Tom didn't want to stay away. She felt both sadness and relief, knowing that part of her life was over. Tears flowed as the memories became painful. She knew she had to keep going through the boxes. A week later, at work, Kathy saw Tom's cousin Janice enter, looking professional and furious. She approached Kathy with an attaché case. You're not very good at keeping your promises, Kathy, Janice hissed. I'm sorry, Janice. I didn't mean for this to happen. But it did, Janice replied, picking up Kathy's nameplate. Are you still Kathy Holden? Yes, Kathy answered. Good, Janice said, putting the attaché case on the desk and pulling out a white folder. You have been served. She then threw a black box on top of the folder. You stupid, cheating witch. You hurt him. He's too good for you. His heart is broken. Maybe he'll find someone else. Listen to the CD. It's beautiful. My cousin was always too good for you, Janice shouted. As Janice turned to leave, Kathy heard someone yell, Wait! Grace got up and walked over to Janice. They talked briefly, and Janice shook her head in agreement. Grace handed something to Janice, who smiled, nodded again, and left, laughing. Grace returned to her desk with a smile. Kathy opened the box, pulling out a CD. There was no card this time, and only Rose and Lisa came to listen. Lisa asked, Do you want to listen now or wait until the end of the day? In the car, Kathy replied. Janice said it was beautiful. Why not now? She inserted the disc, and Garth Brooks' The Dance played. The song's lyrics reflected Tom's feelings about their time together, despite the pain. Rose and Lisa cried, but Kathy did not. The office women were moved by the song. Kathy finally understood Tom's message. She put the CD back in the box, knowing she would see Tom one more time for the divorce finalization. The paper split everything 50-50ths, except for Tom's business, which she didn't care about. She signed the papers. A month after the 6-month waiting period, John and Kathy married. John's practice was doing well, and they bought a house near Tom's. As John's practice grew, he worked late. One Friday night, John's secretary called to say he'd be late. Kathy decided to bring him dinner at the office. When she arrived, she saw only 2 cars, Joan's and an unfamiliar one. She unlocked the office door and heard noises from an exam room. Opening the door, she found John with another woman. Furious, she threw the chicken cacciatore at them and stormed out. Kathy drove away, laughing at the absurdity, then called Lisa, who was at a bachelorette party. Kathy explained she needed to talk and agreed to meet outside the Easton Ave pub. Lisa warned her that Tom was there with a girl. Kathy didn't care. Kathy reflected on her situation. She now understood Tom's pain and humiliation from seeing her with John. She realized she had no one to turn to but her friends, just as Tom had endured his pain alone. Kathy opened her car door to let Lisa and Rose in. She was still sobbing softly. Lisa immediately asked what was wrong. Kathy, struggling to speak, eventually calmed down enough to recount what she had seen. I saw a 40-year-old, bleached blonde woman on the examination table with my new husband, Kathy growled. Neither Lisa nor Rose was surprised. They thought John was an idiot, and were more surprised it had taken Kathy so long to see it. They tried to support her, but didn't give her any slack. Rose said, "What goes around comes around." "I know," Kathy cried. "I feel betrayed and humiliated by John. Now I understand the pain and humiliation I caused Tom. I never felt it until now." Lisa and Rose exchanged glances, deciding not to scold Kathy further. Rosa asked, "What are you going to do next?" Kathy replied, "I don't know. I'm so confused." After a moment, she made a decision. "I'm going home to confront John. What he did is unacceptable." Lisa asked, "Do you want us to come with you?" Kathy replied, "No, I have to do this on my own." The girls got out of the car and watched Kathy drive away. They walked back to the pub and saw Tom at the bar. He greeted them warmly, but their response was cool. "I'm sorry," Tom said, puzzled. "I'll go." Lisa called out, "Tom, wait. It's not what you think. We need to talk to you." Tom checked with his dinner companion, who agreed. He joined Lisa and Rose at their table. "Why are you giving me a hard time?" he asked. Rose explained, "It's not you. We got some bad news tonight." Tom asked, "Is there anything I can do to help?" Lisa replied, "There probably is, but I don't think you'd want to." "What are you talking about?" Tom asked. Lisa said, "It has to do with Kathy." Tom's demeanor changed instantly. "What's she got to do with it?" "She just caught John cheating tonight," Lisa whispered. Tom's face went blank, then he laughed. "Karma's a witch," he said. "Why are you telling me this?" "Nothing," Rose replied. "We just wanted you to know why we came down today." Tom's attitude softened. "Where is she now?" "She went home to confront him," Lisa replied. "That's a bad idea. John's a coward, but he could damage a defenseless woman," Tom warned. Rose snapped, "If he's a coward, why didn't you fight for her?" Tom looked sad. "She said she loved him and didn't love me anymore. Fighting wouldn't change that. I was in a lose-lose situation. Do you understand now, Rose?" Rose nodded, embarrassed. Lisa asked, "So what are you going to do?" "Nothing. She's not my problem anymore," Tom replied. "You can't say that. You loved her once," Lisa reminded him. "That was a long time ago. People and things change," Tom said. Rose spoke up. "Tom, I've known you for 5 years and talked to Paul about you. You're highly regarded here. Even when fighting with friends, you still help them. Katie was your best friend, and despite the hurt, you didn't abandon her. Maybe it's your upbringing or military background, but you don't let people down. You won't change, Tom Holden," said Rose. Tom replied, "Rose, this is a family matter to be decided in court. It's her just reward. If she ever needs help, I'll be there, but this doesn't qualify. He hurt her, but she hurt me too. I'll stay out of their squabbles. Maybe she'll fight for this marriage. It's not for me to get involved now." After an awkward silence, Tom said, "Ladies, it would be nice to see you under different circumstances. Hopefully we can have a drink and laugh next time. Now I need to get back to my date." As he walked away, he added, "Remember, if anything bad happens, let me know." Both girls nodded. They watched Tom return to his table. His companion seemed to scold him, but then placed her hand on his and said, "I understand." Tom pushed his food away, and they eventually left. Lisa and Rose wondered how Kathy would handle confronting John. They paid the bill and left the bar in low spirits. On Monday and Tuesday, Kathy called in sick. Lisa, concerned but hesitant, called John's office on Tuesday. It was open and John was working. Lisa left a message for Kathy, who didn't respond. Lisa and Rosa decided to visit Kathy's house if she didn't return to work on Wednesday. At 9:05 a.m. Wednesday, Kathy arrived at work, wearing large sunglasses to hide bruises. Lisa and Rose quickly took her to the ladies' room. They saw the damage and asked what happened. Kathy, through tears, recounted the events. When Kathy got home, John yelled, "Where have you been? Who were you talking to? Why did you throw food at us? She was an important customer." Kathy replied, "So important that you had to entertain her on your exam table?" John, furious, growled, "From now on, if I want to work late, you'll have to put up with it. If you don't like it, you can leave. Do you understand?" Kathy nodded, horrified. John told her to go clean up. The next morning, Kathy woke with a swollen face. She spent the day trying to reduce the swelling, relieved John was absent. He returned Sunday afternoon without explanation, and Kathy didn't ask. That night, John wanted entertainment, but Kathy declined. John left again on Monday after showering and changing clothes, heading back to the office. The girls listened in silence, first shocked by Kathy's story, then angry at John's callousness. Lisa suggested, "Go to the police and have him arrested for assault." "No!" Katie cried. "I want this marriage to work. I've already messed up one marriage." The women exploded. He did something disgusting to you. Do you think this is the last time? Rosa shouted. I know, Katie replied. I just can't give up so quickly. Lisa got angry. I don't know what to do. I'm giving up, she said, and walked away. Rose left too, but not before taking a quick picture on her phone. She knew exactly what she was going to do. Rose left work early and drove to Tom's store. She parked and walked to the door where Tom was working on a car. He grabbed a rag and smiled as Rose approached. Good to see you, Rose. Are you having car trouble? He asked. No, I need to talk to you in private, she said. Tom looked puzzled, but led her to a small office. Rose finally blurted out, Katie's having problems with John. Tom's expression turned to anger. Any problems with that creep are no longer my concern, he said. Remember when you gave her the Beatles box? She asked. Yeah, it didn't work out. She ripped my heart out. Why should I care now? Tom ranted. Rose pulled out her phone and showed him the picture of Kathy's bruises. What do you want from me? He asked. Are you going to do something? You said you'd protect her, Rose said. Call the police. It looks like assault to me, Tom replied. That's it? That's all you have to say? Rose was furious. She had an affair. She broke her vows. Why should I care about her pain? Tom asked. Because you love her. Isn't that a good reason? Rose declared. I loved her once, but not anymore. Tell her to call the police. I won't get involved, Tom stated. Rose shook her head. You surprised me today. I thought better of you. Tom stood up, anger flaring. She's not my wife. She chose him over me. She made her bed. Let her lie in it. Tell her to get a divorce. I'm sorry if I disappointed you, Rose, but I just can't, he replied. Rose left the office, apologizing to Tom as she got into her car. I'm sorry I bothered you today. I hope I didn't ruin your evening. Tom stood in the middle of the shop, watching her go. Rose didn't respond. She looked through her windshield at Tom's face. It was hard to read. Pain, anger, contempt, hatred, maybe a mix of all. Whatever his emotions, he chose not to help. Rose started the car and drove off, thinking, Katie, you've really screwed this up. She had been so sure Tom would help, but she had failed. She didn't know how to help Kathy now. Kathy came to work on Thursday and Friday. By Monday, she was noticeably more irritable. But then, on Monday morning, something changed. Kathy walked in, said hi to everyone, and even smiled, something she hadn't done in a long time. Lisa and Rose pulled her into the women's restroom and locked the door. What's going on, Katie? What happened? Asked Lisa. John was attacked Friday night outside his office. Whoever did it made him promise to apologize to me and threatened to come back if he didn't. John doesn't know who it was, but I do, Kathy said. How do you know? Asked Rose. I heard him cursing my ex-husband, Tom, in the shower, Kathy giggled. How did he know about it? Rose asked. I told him on Wednesday after work, Rose admitted. Kathy hugged Rose and thanked her. She told her friends she was leaving John and getting a divorce. Don't thank me, Katie. I didn't strike up your husband, Rose said. Maybe you should thank Tom yourself. I don't know, Rose. He's not too fond of me right now, Kathy replied. I know, but you should still thank him in person, Rose insisted. Lisa, Rose, and Kathy went to the Easton Ave pub. They sat at a table near Tom, who was deep in thought, sipping his drink. Lisa gestured for Kathy to go over. Nervous, Kathy approached her ex-husband and sat next to him, noticing his bandaged arm. That must really hurt, she said, touching his bandaged hand. Without looking at her, Tom replied, It's not that bad. What do you need, Katie? Please, I just want to talk, not fight. Do you mind? He nodded. I want to thank you for what you did on Friday. I know it was you. After everything I did, you still helped me when I needed someone. I had to thank you in person, she said. Tom finally turned to face her, pulling his bandaged hand away. You wanted to thank me. It wasn't necessary. Were you worried about me that morning when you left me? Did you care about my pain? No. You only cared about yourself. Why do you care now? You got what you wanted. A doctor's wife instead of a mechanic's. So you used me. My hands hurt, my girlfriend dumped me for helping you, and I could still go to jail. Tomorrow, you'll have someone else in your bed. The only company I have is my pain. Why don't you go away, all three of you? Leave me alone. Katie shook her head at Tom's words. Looking her straight in the eye, he said, Just leave. Kathy's face went pale. She hadn't realized how much pain he was in until now. Before John's bullying, she hadn't thought about what Tom went through. Now she understood the pain, betrayal, and humiliation she caused him. Katie started to speak, but he silenced her with a wave of his bandaged hand. If you don't leave, then I will, he spat. He quickly slid off the bar stool and left, giving Rose and Lisa a disapproving glance as he passed. Katie was shaken, looking at the women with a confused expression. "Go after him, Kathy," Lisa urged. The women ran out and saw Tom driving away in his truck. They went to Lisa's house to discuss the night, unhappy with how things turned out. Katie pulled out the last blue box. There was no note. She put the CD into the player and listened to Randy Travis sing "I Told You So." She remembered a Wednesday night when a small package addressed to her arrived in the mail. From the handwriting, she knew it was from Tom. Kathy opened the box at Lisa's apartment, crying as she listened to the song. "Suppose I call you tonight and tell you I love you. And suppose I said I want to come home, and suppose I cried and said I think I finally learned my lesson and I'm tired of spending all my time alone. If I told you that I realize that you're all I need and it's eliminating me to be so far away, will you tell me you love me too? And will we cry together? Or will you just laugh at me and say, 'I told you. Oh, I told you. I told you that one day you would come crawling back and ask me to take you in. I told you, but you had to leave. Now I've found a new man, and you'll never break my heart in two again.'" Kathy's heart broke again, just like that night at Lisa's. Tom was done with her. He would never let her back into his life. For the first time in a long while, Katie burst into tears. She realized how foolish she had been to give up what she had with Tom. Shortly after receiving the box, Kathy quit her job at the insurance company and took a receptionist job at a local doctor's office. It didn't pay well, but she avoided the judgment from her former coworkers. She stayed with Lisa for 3 months before renting a small apartment from an elderly patient. Her divorce from John was progressing, and she began receiving alimony. Combined with her job, it was enough to pay her rent. Kathy tried to reconnect with Tom, calling and leaving messages, but he never responded. This made her more determined. She sent emails to his address, but there was no reply. Kathy and Lisa planned a night out on Friday. Kathy picked Lisa up and drove to her apartment. When they arrived, they were surprised to see Tom's cousin Janice and Katie's former co-worker Grace in the parking lot. "What are they doing here?" wondered Lisa aloud. "I have no idea, but I don't like seeing Janice again. And why is Grace with her?" Kathy was perplexed. Lisa had an idea but kept quiet. They got out of the car and cautiously approached Janice and Grace. Janice waited until Kathy and Lisa were close before speaking. "Hi, Kathy," Janice said. "Grace and I need to talk to you about something important. Can we go inside and talk privately?" Kathy was wary, remembering their last encounter. "What is this about, Janice? I don't want any trouble," she replied. "Why don't you leave her alone? Why bring up old wounds?" Lisa pleaded. Grace looked sympathetically at Lisa and Kathy. "I would, but Kathy needs to know about this. Please, can we talk inside?" she asked. Confused, Kathy looked at Lisa, who nodded. "Let's go inside," Kathy agreed. Inside Kathy's home, they made small talk, complimenting her decorating. Finally, seated at the kitchen table, Grace got to the point. "Kathy, I know you've been sending letters, emails, and calls to Tom," Grace began. "What business is it of yours? It's a free country. If I want to call him, I will." "He never told me to stop," Kathy retorted. "He wants you to stop. He's too polite to tell you, afraid you won't take it well," Grace informed her. "Kathy," Janice interjected, "please hear us out. We don't want to make things difficult. You need to know that Tom and Grace are getting married next Saturday." Kathy was shocked, her eyes watering. She couldn't speak. "Kathy, please stop contacting Tom. I'm a jealous woman and won't be comfortable with another woman trying to reach my new husband. Too bad you never understood the gift." "I knew its meaning when I first heard 'When I Fall in Love' on your CD player," Grace added. Janice pulled out a thin red box and handed it to Kathy. "Listen to the CD inside. We're sorry about how things turned out, but you needed to know," Janice said gently. After Janice and Grace left, Kathy turned to Lisa. "Did you know about this?" "Yes," Lisa admitted guiltily. "Grace told us a few weeks ago. I didn't know how to tell you. I knew it would hurt." Kathy inserted the CD into her machine. The Shirelles' 1963 hit "Foolish Little Girl" played. "You broke his heart and made him cry, and now he's found someone new. Foolish little girl, you didn't want him when he wanted you. He's found another love, and there's nothing you can do about it." Katie realized Janice was right. There was nothing she could do to fix her life. She needed to stop trying to reclaim what she had lost. She knew it was her fault. Tom and Grace were probably celebrating their marriage now, and she wasn't even a thought. She finally understood what the gift was. Tom's love, something she had carelessly discarded, but Grace had recognized immediately. Frustrated, she realized too late the value of what she had lost.